You're tuned in to HorrorSlop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets, so grab a flashlight, and maybe a therapist.
This is HorrorSlop. Every night starts somewhere, and this is where yours begins. First story, first chill. Let's see if you make it to the end.
My son was always a poor sleeper, by Dopamine. I stopped checking his room around his 4th birthday. He would still toddle out, lip quivering, and ask the same question, "Are you okay, Daddy?" "Yeah, bud. I'm okay." I saw something scary. "It was just a nightmare, honey. Go ahead and go back to sleep." It was the same script, night after night. Maybe I handled it wrong. I always wondered if it'd be better for me to ignore him, or even get angry. But other than this late-night ritual, he slept on his own just fine. Most of the time, he didn't even remember waking up. These nights blended together into a warm, rosy continuum. It was selfish of me, but I looked forward to them. I worked 3rd shift with a fair scattering of graveyard overtime. Due to sleep and work, I rarely saw Noah. That's what made our nighttime ritual was so precious. It was the only time we really had by ourselves. My wife was always asleep whenever Noah came. Between her illness, caring for Noah, and general stress, she had no energy. So most nights off, I'd sit awake into the wee hours, watching TV in a pointless bid to suppress the darkness that was eating me alive. I saw a bad guy in the window. "It was just a bad dream, honey. I want to stop the bad guys." Early the next morning, my wife took Noah for a drive. He loved being in the car. It was his favorite thing. The drive was almost over. They were 3 blocks from home. She waited until the light down at the intersection, a good 2 blocks away, turned red. Waiting for the flow of traffic to stop is the only safe way to do it. That's what she did. That's what she always did. My wife never recovered. I didn't treat her well in the aftermath, either. She had a lot of chronic pain from her injuries, and on top of her health problems couldn't function without medication. I didn't quite dare to openly blame her for Noah's death, but I ridiculed her for her painkillers. Called her dead weight. A drug addict. We divorced and never spoke again. She died a few years ago from complications related to her illness. I miss her every day. I never told her, and now I never can. After the divorce, I rose through the ranks at my job pretty quickly for a while. But I stalled out at senior detective. The department assigned me to the sex crimes unit, and kept me there for 10 years. In the end I wanted to die. Every night, before the drinking commenced, I unholstered my gun and set it on the coffee table. Then I prayed that I'd get drunk enough to finally kill myself. Occasionally I got close. But whenever that happened, I'd wake up from the haze and for just an instant I'd be 31 again, with my wife dozing beside me and my son tromping down the hall to ask if I'm okay. "Are you okay, Daddy?" And there he was, Noah, 4 years old with a big head and red pajamas, squint-eyed and rubbing his face as his lip trembled. I saw something scary. "It was just a nightmare, honey. Go ahead and go back to sleep." I slid to the floor. Cracking joints, sore muscles, and alcohol nausea drove home the fact that I was very much 50 and very much alone. No bad dreams for me. Only a bad life. Are you okay, Daddy? I saw something scary. It was just a nightmare, honey. Go ahead and go back to sleep. It wasn't much. I know that. But in all honesty, it's about as much as I had when he was alive. If I could have this ritual, just this ritual, for the rest of my life, I'd be happy. But last night, he came out crying. Daddy, are you really okay? I saw a bad guy in the window. It was just a bad dream, honey. No. I want to stop them now. A series of muffled thumps suddenly came from Noah's old room. Noah shook his head, inconsolable. No. More thumps and a muffled curse. My gun gleamed on the coffee table, ominous and inviting. I picked it up and crept into the hall. The back of his skull exploded, coating the door in blood and dull curls of brain matter. He stopped at his bedroom door and released a contented sigh, oblivious to the corpse crumpled on the threshold. I love you, Daddy. I love you too. My throat seemed to swell, choking off the words. Noah waited patiently. I struggled to get myself under control. We had a routine. A ritual. And I owed it to him to finish it. Go ahead, I whispered. And go back to sleep.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse. In the best way.
What a pleasant way to begin my 3 a.m. shift at Mercy Hospital. The first thing I did as I sat down was cut my finger. It was a paper cut. And despite working at one of the largest hospitals in the state, I couldn't find a single band-aid laying around. I sat back on the cheap recliner chair all receptionists get the honor of using. While adjusting my band-aid, I listened to the television mounted on the corner of the wall as it broadcasted a seemingly important message. Authorities also say the woman was reportedly walking around and asking people very, very bizarre questions. I focused back on my desk and continued working, but still listened as the news anchor went on and on. She continued. But I wasn't sure anything could scare me anymore. Working here at the hospital, I thought I had seen it all. At the flash of the ruby-red ambulance lights, I've seen people come in with severed arms, legs, fingers, people who somehow managed to scoop out their eyes, failed suicide attempts, and much, much more. You get used to it. I nearly slipped and cracked my head open as the entrance floor was almost flooded from the rain. I noticed footsteps, wet shoe marks that seemed to come inside the hospital and then back out. I stood near the doors, poking my head outside, and looked. All I heard were the distant sounds of sirens and honking cars. The rain poured harder. She looked at me, tilted her head and, with a smile that was as wide as her eyes, said. The woman proceeded as if she was going to finally sign the paper and then stopped before writing anything. She dropped the pen on the ground and stood there again, staring at me. She asked me a question. Do you reject the Trinity? For a few more uncomfortable moments, the woman stood there like an ancient statue. I had no idea what she meant by the question. Nina? Is that you? I called out. Nina, is that you? I squinted my eyes as I walked towards her. Sorry, Matt, she began, I don't want to be there anymore. The other kids bothering you again? I asked. I took hold of her hand and began walking her back to the elevator. I ditched the elevator and ran up a flight of daunting stairs, stomping against each step with all the force I could muster. I probably woke up all those sleeping employees. I was so loud. I opened the door to the children's room and couldn't believe my eyes. I checked each room. Each one on each floor. I woke up my coworker and asked about the children. She couldn't find them either. They just disappeared.
Whew, that one gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
It isn't until now I feel ready to tell anyone about what happened to us. We went through something so unfathomable that it's difficult for me to put it into words, but I'll do my best. Back when it happened, almost 2 years ago, my best friend and I were both studying anthropology in France and we were both avid cave explorers. However, we did find something. It was Alex who saw it first. He yelled at me from where he was doing his business. "Hey, Lester, come check this out." I laughed at the thought of it. "So, what did you find?" "I guess," I said, feeling my heart rate increase. "It could be nothing. I find it hard to believe that no one would have discovered a cave system in this area. We aren't that far away from the main road." We crawled our way inside of the cave. Had we been just a tad bit bigger we would never have fit, that was how small the opening was. I didn't suffer from claustrophobia, if I did I wouldn't have been a cave explorer, but I didn't enjoy small passages like this. The thought of getting stuck still made me cringe. I had read enough horror stories about cave explorers getting killed that way to do my best to avoid crawl spaces, but in this case, I made an exception. Alex went in first and I followed close behind him. A few meters in, a cold wind reached us. "Are you feeling this?" Alex said as he pushed his body through the small cave. "That's a cross breeze." "Good," I said with some relief in my voice, "that means there's an opening somewhere further ahead." "Is it getting tighter or wider?" I asked. "I can't tell." We kept going. My body ached. In some places, it was so narrow that I thought I would have to break my ribs to get through. The cave went upward, forcing us to climb, then it went down until it turned sharply and continued to the south. The total absence of light except for our headlights felt suffocating. We came across a pitch, a steep section that we had to use our ropes to get down. We had never tried cave diving before, and I felt really stupid doing it now given how risky it was. A few more dangerous squeezes followed. The dust on the ground kept getting into my mouth. By now, I was exhausted. "I think we should turn back," I said. "I'm getting too tired, and frankly I'm starting to worry a little bit. We've been here for more than an hour. Perhaps we should try again tomorrow." "Don't give up, Lester," Alex said. "It will be extremely difficult to go back the way we came, there's nowhere to turn around. Our best shot is to keep going and try to find the other opening." I could hear fear in his otherwise confident voice, something that scared me just as much as our predicament. Just moments later, Alex spoke again. The room was big enough for us to stand in. It was only illuminated by our flashlights and headlights. Looking back at the hole we just came out of, it was clear that it was too small for us to enter. Squeezing yourself out of a tiny hole is one thing, crawling inside of it another. Realizing this, my heart almost stopped. If the hole that let the cold air in was too small as well, if there was such a hole at all, we would die in here. I pointed my flashlight at Alex's face. His frosty agitated breath told me he was just as terrified as I was. Slowly, we tracked the walls with our flashlights. To our relief, there was a second opening big enough for us to enter. Before I had time to cool down, something inside of the opening caught my eye. It was a skeleton, covered in some dark clothes. The lower part of its body was still inside the hole, meaning he or she must have died trying to crawl out of it and gotten stuck. I shone my flashlight on the face of the skull. It almost looked like it was smiling at us, a big horrific grin. Put it away, I said. What? I asked in a whisper. Can't you see it? He asked rhetorically. I was too stressed to see anything particular with it. So, I said. He turned the skull around so that the face was staring at us again. Look at its facial structures, very pronounced. Its eyebrows are heavy. Look, Lester, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think we are looking at the skull of a Neanderthal. That is crazy, I said, although I could clearly see the similarities from the skulls we had been studying in class. Look at the bones, it must have died at least within this century. I know, Alex said, and yet this is clearly the skull of a Neanderthal. I mean, I know Neanderthal DNA in humans can affect the shape of the skull, but this is something else. With a mixture of fear, confusion, and excitement, we decided to carefully move the remains away from the opening and leave the cave so that we could report our findings to the university. This passage was larger and we could make our way through it with ease. The worry disappeared from our voices as we crawled, and the excitement over what we had found took over. We did fear what the faculty would say about our amateurish expedition, but surely our discovery would compensate for our foolishness to some degree. We saw the light at the end of the cave, but strangely enough, it was still cold. Alex got out first. I saw what he meant. There were patches of snow in the grass. This was in late August and it had been one of the warmest summers in recent memory. Dumbfounded, we looked around trying to figure out what was going on. In front of us, there was a set of large boulders obscuring the view. We slowly walked past them and entered the forest. It seemed thicker than before. How much time did we spend in that cave? Alex said, trying to make it sound like a joke although he was obviously frightened. It's winter, or... I mean... it's early spring, at least. The sun is where it's supposed to be, I said. Whatever is going on, this is the same day. That's a mammoth. I continued. I think they're dogs, Alex said. What are you on about? I said, trying to deny his conclusion to the bitter end. Are you really saying? They have, a language. And, going by the way they're moving their hands, parts of it are sign language. Alex was way ahead of me already. No, they have guns. As you said, this is the same day. It's just not the same Earth. I don't think Homo sapiens led them to extinction here. This is incredibly fascinating, Lester. I can't believe it. It feels like I'm dreaming, but you're seeing the same thing, right? I mean, I'm not lying in that cave slowly dying from carbon monoxide poisoning, am I? Well, look at them. They domesticated the dog, but they bred them into something different than we did. And look, they didn't exterminate the megafauna. That points to a smaller population like we always suspected. It could explain the weather as well, I said while I watched how one of the presumed Neanderthals petted one of the huge dogs. A smaller population of hominids during 40,000 years would have meant a much smaller amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and... Something growled behind us, and then it barked. Our blood ran cold. I looked behind us. One of the large hounds had found us. The beast charged at us. We had no choice but to run down from the hill, right into the arms of the cloaked men. They gathered around us, pointing their rifles at us. They were huge, much larger than a typical man, or rather, than a human. Their knocking sounds, coming from deep inside their throats, was mixed in with deep sounds that didn't resemble any language I had ever heard. From what I could tell by their hand movements and agitation in their voices, they seemed just as distressed as Alex and I. Their faces were shadowed by their hoods, but I could still see that they had the typical Neanderthal facial structures. My thoughts, still having trouble accepting what was happening, was in a disarray. We both interpreted it as something similar to, hands up, and fell on our knees and raised our hands. It all depends what happened to Homo sapiens in this world, Alex whispered. If they see our species as mortal enemies we might be doomed, but if we died out thousands of years ago they'll probably want to keep us alive. The man that had yelled lit what looked like a mixture between a cigarette and a cigar with a large match. I tried to assess their level of technology. The rifles, clearly made for hunting, didn't have scopes, only iron sights. My first thought was that this indicated a lower technological level than the one we had at home, but then I realized that it might rather be a result of their larger eyes and areas of the brain devoted to vision. Maybe they simply didn't need scopes because of their superior sight. He was right. A vehicle stood on a dirt road in front of us. It had 8 wheels, 6 at the back and 2 in the front, and resembled a diesel locomotive more than a truck. It was completely black, just like their clothes. They opened the back doors and pushed us inside the storage space. There was a smell of dead animals and gasoline. We were placed next to each other on a bench attached to the wall, and 2 of the Neanderthals sat down in front of us, looking at us constantly. The only light came from 2 small windows on the back door. The truck began to move. I wonder what they'll think about our cell phones, Alex said. The Neanderthals each lit one of those big cigarettes, and the glow from them lit up their strong faces. One of them had green eyes. Alex smiled, but the fear in his eyes didn't go away. We couldn't see anything outside, except that the sun was setting, but we felt the bumps in the road as the truck drove forward at a pretty high speed. After some time, the road became smooth. Had we reached a highway? It was hard to tell. We couldn't hear any other vehicles outside. Wherever we were going, it was far away. We didn't stop until 3 or 4 hours later. It must have been in the middle of the night, but we didn't get to see the night sky. When the back doors were opened, we stepped out inside of a large garage. There were a lot of black vehicles parked under the high ceilings, but none of them looked like the one we had come with. These vehicles were smaller, like cars. All black. I guessed that this place wasn't where they usually went. The architecture was similar to Soviet-era brutalism and was as devoid of colors as everything else in this place. After what we had already seen, I wasn't surprised to discover that they had mastered electricity. However, they didn't use fluorescent lights as in a modern garage, but rather pretty dim, but still large, lamps hanging from the ceiling. Again, I came to think of their better vision. One of the hunters used a radio attached to the dashboard of their truck. After half an hour or so a small door opened, the sound of it echoing through the garage. 3 people, a bit smaller, walked out of it. The group that had captured us pushed us in our backs so that we would straighten our backs. This seemed to be important to them, as they did it themselves as well. The new people didn't wear the same clothes as our capturers. They still covered their faces, not with hoods but with thin black veils. As they got closer to us, I could tell that they were women. We stepped into an elevator. Unlike the elevators we were used to, this one was merely a platform. My clothes scraped against the gray concrete walls of the shaft as we went up. Looking up, I could tell the building was tall. One of the women controlled the elevator with a lever rather than just pressing a button. It was all clunky and cumbersome, but remarkably effective. Plastic, Alex said without being understood. Alex took his phone and unlocked it. This was the first time these people would see our level of technology. After some deliberation, 2 women with batons led us into the elevator again. This time, we stopped at the last floor, maybe 200 meters above the surface. They took us through a corridor with what looked like office doors to the side. To my disappointment, there were no windows. A few other women stepped out of their offices and looked at us as we passed, equally mesmerized as they were scared. At the end of the hallway, there was a door that led into a room of greater importance than the other rooms. There was some text next to the door. I couldn't tell if the characters were phonetic or logographic, but at least they didn't look like hieroglyphs. One of the women pressed a button in the middle of the door. It didn't make any sound but was probably some sort of doorbell. While we waited for the door to open, a faint alarm could be heard from somewhere nearby, probably outside, and 1 minute later the building began to shake a little. I looked at Alex, who looked back at me, but it didn't seem to faze the Neanderthals. The door opened automatically. We were pushed inside the room. It was big, just like everything else. A black carpet, the skin of some animal, covered the floor, and a heavy desk stood in front of us. Behind it, another woman was sitting. Unlike the others, she didn't cover her face. Her hair was red and her eyes were blue. She wore something similar to a jumpsuit, not black but light gray. Behind her, there was a large window, but nothing but darkness could be seen outside. There were no electric lights, which meant we weren't in a city. Perhaps, I thought, they didn't even have cities. The women who brought us here placed their batons at the fold of our knees, giving us an electric shock so that we fell in front of the massive desk. Alex yelled out in pain but didn't look as scared as I was. My body trembled with fear. The woman sitting behind the desk got up from her chair and walked over to us. They spoke over our heads while we remained silent. They wouldn't understand us anyway. They won't harm us, Alex said. We're too valuable for them. I don't want to be locked up in a laboratory, I said. We will find a way, Alex began, but was interrupted by the woman that seemed to be in charge. I don't get it, I said, way too stressed to think clearly. It wasn't until he said that I saw it. The map had a completely different orientation. Firstly, it was a south-up map, meaning upside down from our perspective. Secondly, it was a little bit off-center, putting Central Europe right in the middle. And thirdly, the sizes of the land masses were displayed a bit differently. Since we couldn't explain where we came from, Alex tried to give the woman the location of our species' origin instead. By the look of her face, she didn't seem to believe us. Still, she let us study the map while she studied us. Look, Alex said. There are no borders. They don't have countries, I said. But what about these pictograms? Small black skulls, displayed from the side, was spread all over the map. Dotted circles of different sizes surrounded them. Are they some kind of dead zones? What does it mean? Are you suggesting, I asked. All the way to Australia, I said. But look here, Alex said without listening to me. He placed his finger at Indonesia. This blue region. The skulls there are different too. Can you see it? Homo floresiensis, I whispered. You bet. The black skulls, the Neanderthals, dominated Europe, Africa and most of the New World, while the Denisovans seemed to rule Asia, and some parts of the west side of South America, together with the small area dominated by Homo floresiensis. The ice caps were, as expected, larger than in our world, but it didn't seem to prevent the Neanderthals from living close to the North Pole. They even had cities in Greenland, although their total amount of cities was smaller than the amount in most countries in our world. After this meeting, the purpose of which we couldn't understand, we were taken to a large cave system beneath the tower structure. It soon became apparent to us that it was a mine combined with a subterranean prison camp. The conditions were, to say the least, hellish. There were hundreds of cells carved out in the bedrock, covered with prison bars, some of them filled with 4 to 5 people. They were all wearing yellow overalls, just like us, which made my heart sink to my stomach. Denisovans, Alex whispered. They unlocked a cell that had a pretty good view over the mine, and pushed us inside. During the night, all we could do was to listen to the echoes of the pickaxes, the whips, and the Denisovans' screams. Poor beings, I said. I'm sure there's a similar cave in Asia filled with Neanderthals, Alex said. There's a certain balance here, you know. What happened to us here? I mean, to our species. Finally, one of the women from the tower, accompanied by a group of armed prison guards, came down to us. She looked at us with dismay in her eyes, although it was difficult to know exactly what emotions the Neanderthals were showing with their expressions. My God! Alex said as he pointed at the sky. Out of the mist, accompanied by the deep sound of a horn being blown not far from us, a huge airship, resembling a pitch-black zeppelin, descended. Some of the soldiers spread out and grabbed the lines that were thrown down from the airship and helped it land in the middle of the square. The rest of the soldiers formed two lines next to the entrance of the ship, and their commander placed herself in the middle, ready to welcome the people who had just arrived. We were led forward until we stood behind the commander. It became clear the ship had arrived because of us. Most likely, it was a group of higher-ups that wanted to investigate us by themselves. We looked on with anticipation as the doors opened. Another group of women exited the ship, dressed in red uniforms that looked a bit more decorated than the ones we had seen so far, and walked toward us. The commander in front of us saluted them by bowing, as did the soldiers. By reflex, I did the same thing, but Alex remained still. The new group examined us closely. One of them stared Alex down while she grabbed his chin and turned his face left to right. I was scared out of my mind. I couldn't imagine a way out of this. A group of soldiers came out of the airship, joining the others. It was clear that our arrival was considered a high priority and that the security at this site was being enforced. Another black vehicle, this time the size of a bus, drove up to us from an arched opening at the other side of the square. We were forced to enter it together with the women and 5 soldiers. I wonder what the payload is, I said. The bus stopped on a metal platform, patrolled by one of the prison guards, that descended into the ground. It took us to an underground road, as broad as a highway, that was illuminated by dim green lights in the ceiling. The bus stopped on the other side of the bridge. First I didn't understand why, since we were still in the middle of the road, but then I noticed the small door to our right side. One of the women got up and pointed at Alex. A confusion came upon his face. A soldier stood up and grabbed his arm, saying something to him we couldn't understand. It's okay. Alex yelled. They won't harm us, we're too valuable. You know where I'm being held. Find me. 10 minutes later the bus entered a smaller road, blocked by a road boom barrier that opened after one of the soldiers stepped outside and pulled a lever. The road ahead was a downward spiral that led to what looked like the garage from earlier, except this one was guarded by soldiers. Why had I been taken to such a secure location when Alex was taken to a small anonymous room? I couldn't figure it out, but my gut told me it wasn't a good sign. After going down a few floors with an elevator, I was brought to what looked like a scientific facility. The walls were white here, rather than the typical gray, and a lot of the personnel wore red protective masks. They placed me in a small chamber, dressed me down completely and washed my malnourished body with a large hose. The cold water made my body shudder and numb. When they were done they sat me down on top of an examining table in another room. My teeth chattered against each other. I felt hopeless and began to cry. The last time I cried was when my girlfriend broke up with me in 7th grade. The Neanderthals took a step back when they saw me bawl my eyes out. One of the researchers took a cotton swab and collected some of my tears. Of course, they knew that. Most likely, they were only testing the system. I had studied the remains of their species for years, always imagining them in a Neolithic context, as troglodytes wielding spears. Now, as they looked down on my naked body dressed in their fancy uniforms, the tables had turned. Here, I was the prehistoric caveman reappearing from a long-forgotten past.
Something still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
Before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed the number, gave the operator my address, and told her what I was about to do. After ending the call, I inhaled a deep, preparatory breath, placed the bag over my head, secured it around my neck, and then released the valve on the helium tank. Maybe it wasn't the best way to go about taking my own life, but it sure as hell beat slicing up my arms and praying the ambulance would arrive before I bled out on the carpet. As a bonus, it would be completely painless, like falling asleep, if my research was to be believed. This was it. I only hoped it wouldn't be the end of me. For what seemed like an eternity, there was nothing but blackness. Just an endless void that lacked any and all light. That's how I perceived it, anyway. It's possible I was seeing the back of my eyelids from a gurney on its way through the emergency room. I just knew I was conscious, at least in some fashion, but with no access to my physical body. An orb of awareness floating through a sea of nothing. The feeling subsided almost as quickly as it came, and the light dissipated, revealing my new surroundings. I was in a white room with a single door at one of its walls. Not white really, I suppose blank is a better word for it, like a brightness with no color. It seemed to breathe as well. The walls, the floor, they expanded and contracted as translucent waves of glowing energy resonated throughout. The only dissonance was the view above. No roof or ceiling, just pitch black as far as the eye could see. Seeing as the door was my only viable means of progressing, I gathered my wits and approached it. To my surprise, before I could even reach for the handle, it opened, and a man stepped out from within. He snapped his fingers and they appeared on either side of him. My wife and daughter. Charlotte. Leslie. I took a step forward, but the man put out his hand to stop me. They can't hear you, Jack. They are shells of their former selves. What the hell is going on here? How do you know me? What have you done to my wife and daughter? You're a lucky man, Jack. I'm going to tell you everything. Secrets no mortal was ever meant to know. He leaned in a bit before divulging his truths. Your kind call us guardian angels, but we don't protect you, we just observe and make sure things go according to plan. You are the 3 I've been assigned to since Leslie's birth. It used to be 1 per human, but there are less of us now than ever before. Now it's 1 to a family. When a person's been here long enough, we take their life force, extracting every last remnant of their soul. We devour them. You humans need air, food, and water to live, we need souls. It's the only thing keeping us alive. This system of ours has been in place since the dawn of time and will continue long after the universe has folded in on itself. Charlotte and Leslie's tickets are up. I've been picking away at them bit by bit. It's a long and tedious process, one that's very unpleasant for the soul's host. They're damaged goods now. My blood boiled at every word that fell from his lips. Without hesitating, I took a swing at him. My fist met the side of his face and then went right through, like punching a ghost. My anger only grew. Why are you even telling me any of this? Then how do you plan on taking mine? You're not dead. Not completely. There's still a chance you'll be saved. That means, while you're in this cross-section of life and death, I cannot retrieve your soul. Not without your consent. He smiled and looked down at Leslie and Charlotte. These are, what's the phrase, my bargaining chips. My eyes widened and my heart sank. I was undoubtedly fearful for their safety in all of this. Whatever he was up to, he certainly had my attention now. He was right. It was my desire, all along, to bring them back with me, but I didn't have much of a plan after getting in. The idea was to find whoever was in charge and beg for their help. I thought, at the very least, I would be allowed to communicate with them and make sure they were okay, maybe even ask for their forgiveness. That's not possible. Look at them, Jack. They're well past dead. Not even I have the power to rectify what's been done. I took a closer look. Charlotte adorned a pair of empty eyes and pale skin, stuck in a zombie-like stupor. Even Leslie, who had always been so vibrant and full of life when she was alive, was now still. As still as she was on that slab in the morgue after the accident. I looked away, tears now rolling down my cheeks. I just wanted to bring them back. My wife and my sweet little girl. It was my job to protect them and I failed. I'm the one who did this. I was the one behind the wheel. It should have been me instead. He placed his hand to his chin in contemplation before dislocating it and tossing me a stern look. Okay, how about 1,000? He scoffed at my counteroffer. You don't have to believe me, Jack, but I'm not lying. 1,000 years is the best I can do. Take it or leave it. Maybe he was being honest. Even so, I didn't like the offer. If I accepted, I would be knowingly throwing my wife and daughter's souls to the beast. They would be chewed up and swallowed like table scraps. No. I couldn't let that happen. No. The man let out a sigh of disappointment. He then waltzed over and put a condescending hand on my shoulder. My hands were now clenched, the tips of my nails almost breaking skin. I took another swing, but, much like before, my hand passed right through with no resistance whatsoever. He was toying with me and knew just what buttons to push. It's about survival, Jack. A fresh soul like yours could keep me alive for thousands of years. I can't afford to be empathetic when my very existence is on the line. The man placed a hand on my forehead. In an instant, the room faded, and I was transported into my car, driving down the back roads of our old neighborhood, Charlotte and Leslie in the back seat, looking out the window at Christmas lights. It was a memory of mine from last winter. Just then, the man from heaven appeared in the passenger seat. This is one of my favorites. You were so happy back then. What the hell are you doing here? I asked. I stole a glimpse of Charlotte and Leslie through the rearview mirror. They were smiling, happily looking out at all the decorated houses. It wasn't really my wife and daughter, just a memory, but it felt so good to see them like this. It was peaceful. I can make it feel like years in here, Jack. Just say the word and it's yours. It was a tempting offer. More than tempting, actually. It took every fiber in me not to accept right then and there. The only thing I wanted more than to live in a fantasy like this was the real thing. More than that, I wanted my family to be safe. Why can't you just let them go? I'll give you my soul. I just want them to be safe. I told you, Jack. It's not within my power. Their souls have been thoroughly shredded. We sat quiet for the rest of the ride, both seething with anger. Once the memory ran its course and I pulled into our driveway at home, the man turned to me and placed his hand on my forehead again, putting me in another memory. This time, I was in a hospital. I heard Charlotte screaming, and all at once it came back to me. This was the day Leslie was born. Beautiful, isn't it? Gross, but beautiful. He sat down on the hospital bed where Charlotte had just given birth. These precious moments are all you have left now. You should take them while you still can. A single tear fell from my face. It started happy, rolling down my cheek at the sight of my daughter, so precious and loving. It ended sad when she disappeared, grazing my chin and hitting the floor with a heartbreaking splash. It reminded me of the day she was taken from me. The day I lost both of them. What'll it be, Jack? The clock is ticking. I am helping them. It's simple. You need my soul and I need their safety. Not for a finite period of time, and not in here. Down there, on Earth, far away from things like you. Figure out how to make it happen or no deal. His lips contorted into a mad grin. You know what? I have a better idea. No, it can't be. Oh yes, Jack, it can. This is the night you killed your family. No. You can't do this. Eventually, I swerved and we crashed into that damned tree. That cold pillar of wood whose image would forever be etched into my mind, plaguing my every nightmare. The sound of my daughter's screams echoed all around before giving way to the shattering of glass and the loud crunch of deforming metal. The abrupt silence that followed was sickening. Just as I had on the day in question, I craned my neck back and saw Leslie, covered in blood and shrapnel. Charlotte was even worse. Her airbag failed to go off, so she ricocheted off the windshield, breaking her neck. Her head was hunched over, bent farther back than I thought humanly possible. Shortly after witnessing the aftermath, I passed out, and the horror continued. I awoke in the car at the same moment as before. Charlotte was next to me and Leslie was in the back seat next to that twisted angel and his piercing smile. So, what'll it be, Jack? Take my offer or we relive this crash indefinitely. Even if the paramedics revive you down there on Earth, I can make this feel like a lifetime or more. You can have 1,000 years of peace for your wife and daughter, or 1,000 years of this. Can your fragile mind even handle that? Let's find out. Come on, Jack. Just say yes. It's that simple. Give me your soul. Alright, Jack, have it your way. It was a man, standing in the middle of the road. There was something familiar about him, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what. It was you. You were the one standing in the road. You're the one I was avoiding when I swerved. It was you, this whole time. Looking at him through the mirror, I watched him become visibly nervous when I finally put the pieces together. Like I said, Jack. Survival. If I waited any longer for any of you to die, I would have perished myself. It was nothing personal. I turned to see him staring out the car window, defeated. This little outing of ours had to be sanctioned with the higher-ups. They've been monitoring everything. I thought I tampered with your memory well enough for you to forget. Now that you know, they know too. I'll have to stand trial. It won't be long now before Dash. Hello, Jack. How are you today? One of the higher-ups he was talking about. He pointed at the pile of ash in the back seat. Yes, more dead than anything in this universe can be, in fact. I saw to it myself. It was all becoming clear now. That man ruined my life. He was to blame for everything. A wave of anger overcame me as I sat upright to meet his gaze. His friendly demeanor turned cold as I said this. You know, people who speak to someone like me in that sort of tone usually end up like him. Like the man before him, he placed a hand on my forehead. After that, my sight was overtaken by a familiar darkness. A vast void where I could do nothing but drift. Then, I saw it. It was faint at first, but its glow became more visible as time went on. It was a light, and soon it enveloped me. ////. Oh my gosh, you're awake. She dashed over to my floor and replaced the fluids while checking my vitals on the monitor. Oh, about 3 days or so. You're going to be on suicide watch after that stunt you pulled, just to forewarn you. Oh. You have some visitors. It's your wife and daughter. I don't have words for how I felt. They were back. My family, in my arms again. It was this man, Jack. He came and patched us up and then sent us back. It's like we never left. She was crying. Happy tears, not sad ones. It's a miracle, Jack. ////. Whenever that day does come and we have to move on to the next world, I will be prepared. Mark my words, somehow, I will find a way to protect their souls from harm. No one will lay a hand on my family, not while I'm around.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
Around 8 years ago my daughter went missing. I remember the morning I lost her like it was yesterday. I woke up before my husband, only to find the front door ajar. Panic ran through my veins as I went to check my little girl's bedroom, but Sarah was gone. She was 4 years old. The police searched for months. There was an Amber Alert for her. We put out hundreds of missing persons posters. There were thousands of tips called in, but none of them yielded anything of value. I just couldn't believe that was happening to us. How could the world be so cruel? I, of course, was destroyed. I couldn't sleep, and I barely ate. It got to a point where I was hardly functioning. If it wasn't for my husband, I don't think I would have gotten through it. He was my rock, and while I knew on the inside he was upset, he stayed strong for me. We couldn't both break down, and thankfully he never lost it like I did. Not in front of me, at least. We'll get through this, he would say. He paused before he answered, I'm not sure. Somehow, the hardship brought us closer. While this kind of horror would tear most couples apart, it only made us stronger. It was the way he was there for me, the way he picked me up when I was down. I made the right choice in a partner, I thought through it all. A few years later I found out I was pregnant again. I was nervous, feeling as though I'd failed once before. My husband reassured me, of course. I gave birth to another daughter. We named her Jennifer Sarah, after her sister. As she grew, I noticed there were odd similarities between the two. They looked so much alike, they even had similar birthmarks on their cheeks. When I'd pulled out a few of Sarah's old toys, it was like Jennifer recognized them. She even gave her dolls the same names that her sister had. They also liked the same foods, loved the same shows, and would even want me to read the same bedtime story. I felt like I was blessed with a second chance. Jennifer was closer to me than she was with her father. He didn't mind, of course, it gave him more time to focus on his work. He was present as a father, but he wasn't really fond of babysitting, as he would call it. To be honest, I think the similarities were too much for him. Maybe it was too painful. I didn't mind though. I know it's selfish, but I liked the fact she preferred to spend all of her time with me. Once her father had even offered to take her to the park, but she refused. She wanted me to go instead. Yesterday something very alarming happened. I took Jennifer to the park. It had a large play structure which she enjoyed, and was surrounded by peaceful woods, which I enjoyed. I watched as she played the same way Sarah did when I used to take her there. After running aimlessly through the woods while calling her name, I finally found Jennifer. She was underneath a tree, and was digging for something. Her hands were covered in dirt, and she looked worried. I hugged her and sighed in relief. "Do you want to stay here with Daddy?" I began. "I'll be right back." "Okay, but you need to stay right next to me," I relented. "No running off, you really scared me." "I know. I'll stay close this time, promise." I dusted off the hard surface I had struck, only to find something that was an off-white color. I dusted away the dirt, until I could make out what I was looking at. There in front of me was a child-sized skull. Beside it I saw something shining in the light. I picked it up to reveal it was a butterfly earring, one from a set I'd bought Sarah a few days before she went missing. "It's me, Mommy," Jennifer started with a mouth full of peanut butter and jelly sandwich. "That's where Daddy left me after he put me to sleep."
You feel that? That weird pressure in the room? Yeah. That's the algorithm. It knows you're watching, and it gets real cranky when you don't feed it. A simple ritual helps. Click the little thumbs up, tap subscribe, say its name 3 times into your phone mic. Kidding, probably.
Engagement appeases the darkness. You know what to do.
Good, human. Now, back to the horror.
Nobody is coming to my best friend's wedding, by Substantial Eternal. My best friend Melissa is getting married, and of the 100 people she invited, I'm the only one who's going. The other 99. Total crickets. Not one single yes or no after the invites went out. At first we thought they might have gotten lost in the mail or she used the wrong stamps. But when she texted everyone to ask if they received the invites and to remind them to RSVP, they ignored her completely. And number X200B. And then 2 weeks before the wedding, Melissa told me her fiancé Seth was missing. And number X200B. So here's the thing, I had never met Seth. In fact, I had only known Melissa for a few months. We met when her car broke down in front of my house, and I offered her my front porch to sit on while she waited for the tow truck. Melissa told me her fiancé Seth was on a business trip and that he would be back the week before the wedding. And number X200B. And why wouldn't I believe her? And number X200B. Or maybe, even more. And number X200B. Because I loved her very much. I wanted her to be happy. And I could see that wedding planning was stressing her out so bad that she was losing sleep. Even before she broke down in tears and told me nobody was coming, even before Seth went missing, I could see that she was slowly losing her mind. I kept asking her what was going on and she kept saying she'll explain when we get there. We drove for hours, stopping once to pee and another time to get gas. It was before sunrise when we started and we were still going when the sun went down. And number X200B. She first drove across state lines, and then 5 hours later, she drove back across the same state lines. I remembered the same rest stop we passed in the morning because of a red car that was parked there. And number X200B. And number X200B. She drove faster and faster. We sped past every other car on the road, and people rage honked at us screaming obscenities. We were going 75 and then 80 and then 90. The car was shaking like a toy and Melissa seemed to be in a trance. She was mentally somewhere else and I was numb, paralyzed with fear. I did not know what to do. I prepared myself to die and then it occurred to me. And number X200B. She swerved in front of a truck and I knew it was all over. I felt it in my bones. I wasn't even scared. And number X200B. But she hadn't crashed us, only took an exit ramp. And then we were driving slowly down a residential street. She stopped the car in front of a house where a girl was smoking on the porch. And number X200B. And number X200B. And number X200B. And because I was tired and hungry and frightened and confused, I believed her. And number X200B. Backslash. And number X200B. The events of the previous hours were a blur. Things had happened so fast that it was as if they had happened to somebody else. I still didn't understand, and I had a feeling I was never going to. The whole day was like a bad dream. And number X200B. And number X200B. The manager came up to our table and said, "Hey Melissa, long time no see." Melissa said, "Oh hey, I didn't know you were working tonight." And number X200B. The guy laughed and said, "I work every night. Who's your lovely friend?" A real charmer. And number X200B. Melissa told me that was her cousin. And number X200B. And number X200B. Melissa and I had a few more drinks, and then went outside to the parking lot and got in her car. She started the car and the car didn't move. The engine was going but the car wasn't. We got out to investigate and found one of the tires was flat as a pancake, even though it was fine when we drove in. And then the manager guy, her cousin, was somehow right there behind us, scared the shit out of me. He looked me straight in the eye and said with a smirk, "Looks like you'll need a ride after all." And number X200B. And number X200B. I was so surprised I just stood staring at the closed door, wanting to kick it down and make her tell me what the hell was going on. Her cousin tried to lead me back to the car, but I was like, "I'll walk. It isn't safe, it's midnight, get in the car," he said, or more like, commanded. And number X200B. He was a big guy and I knew I wouldn't have a chance if he tried anything funny. So I pretended to get in the car, but when he went around to the driver's side, I ran away down an alley. I could hear him shouting after me, but I hid in a dumpster until he gave up and left. Backslash. And number X200B. Everything in my head screamed no. I no longer trusted her after what she did that night, and I never wanted to see her again. Looking at her made me feel sick. She had told me the girl knew where Seth was. She had told me the girl was in on it and Seth's life was in danger. She had told me there was a whole gang. And number X200B. But there was no Seth and no gang, just a girl in an empty house. And then the blood, so much blood. And number X200B. As the days went by, I had began to wonder and then to suspect what exactly I had helped Melissa do. Her entire story had more holes than a cheesecloth. The fact was I barely knew her. She was a mystery to me, and it had been that way from the beginning. And number X200B. Anyway, I was wildly curious to meet her family. Melissa's creepy cousin was there at the barbecue. In broad daylight, surrounded by adoring nieces and nephews, he didn't seem so bad, but I reminded myself neither did Ted Bundy. Everything was going fine until Melissa started talking about Seth and how the police hadn't done jack shit. To be honest, I was surprised nobody had mentioned it until then. Melissa was working herself up into a real rage and everybody was like they didn't know where to look. Some stared at their phones, a few others left, and her creepy cousin looked pissed. It was a weird scene. And number X200B. It was only Melissa's mom who reacted in a way that made any sense at all. She put her arms around Melissa and told her it was alright. But this was apparently the wrong thing to do because Melissa started screaming for them to leave her alone and ran out of the house. Her mom was like, "Oh my God," and started going after her, but the creepy cousin stopped her and said, "Let her get it out of her system." And number X200B. "What if she gets in the car?" Melissa's mom said. "I have the key," the cousin said, showing her the key. "Every year," I said. And number X200B. And number X200B. "So Seth's been missing for 3 years?" I said. And number X200B. Backslash. And number X200B. I had mentally prepared myself to ignore her stupid shit, and I did. I asked her to take me to the police station so I can see the missing person report she said she had filed, and of course she refused. She said I had no right to ask her, which was true, and that she had thought I was different, appealing to my vanity, but actually I'm just like the rest of them. Since vanity didn't work, let's try guilt tripping. I didn't know what to think. And number X200B. And that was how I knew she was not crazy, she was evil. And number X200B. But I already knew, and it was as if I had known all along. And number X200B. She cackled, and then she came towards me. We were in her apartment. It was midnight and not a single soul knew I was there. And number X200B. You're the only one who knows, she said. Don't you see how that can be awkward for me? And number X200B. I thought of the girl that night, the look in her eyes when she saw Melissa, as if what she had feared all her life had come true at last. And in the end, she had seemed almost relieved. I now knew how that poor girl felt. It was exhausting being afraid all the time, looking over your shoulder, waiting for it to happen. And number X200B. When Melissa hit me again, I didn't resist and let myself slump against the wall. I knew what she was going to do to me. She had practically told me. I would have gotten into the car myself if only she had asked me, but she wasn't the asking type. She just took. A life here, a life there, it was all the same to her. And the weird thing was, I still couldn't hate her. And number X200B. And number X200B. And now, I thought, I will go to be with him. It won't hurt at all, a woman's voice said. You won't feel a thing. And number X200B. She gave you just enough to make you sleep, Melissa's cousin told me. And number X200B. And number X200B. What about me? I said. What I did. And number X200B. His face became blank and stupid looking. I don't know what you're talking about. Melissa's gone, what more can justice ask for? And number X200B. You saw through her, it's funny you don't see through me too, I said. And number X200B. And number X200B. And number X200B. Backslash. And number X200B. We've been married now for 10 years and he still refuses to talk about it. I can feel him look at me sometimes, as if he was doubting his own eyes. One night he told me I looked like Melissa. And number X200B. And number X200B. Backslash. And number X200B. 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 And number X200B.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
Every day I'm visited by two birds. One brings good news. The other brings bad, by author Jojo. The other bird was a raven. Its ruffled feathers were darker than the spaces between the stars and seemed to soak up the sun. It has beady red eyes that reminded me of the blood moon. After the dove was done, the raven would sing. When its song reached me, I would have a memory of something bad that was going to happen that day. Their predictions always came to pass. When I was younger, the predictions were simple and generally innocent. Like when the dove sang that the school would be serving pizza for lunch and the raven retorted that I would get a paper cut in math class. Sure enough, I would walk to school and at lunch, I'd be given 2 slices of pizza. I'd be so content from lunch that I would carelessly pull my textbook from my backpack and a loose page would slice my finger open. It just goes to show you how simple middle school really was. Even back then, bad news wasn't typically that bad. The cut hurt, but it healed in no time. The dove even told me the next morning that I'd get ice cream for being such a brave little girl. The raven said I'd forget my pencils at home. Even if the predictions were things I could easily alter, I never seemed to be able to. Like the day I just mentioned, I made a note to grab my favorite pencil before I left. I was so focused on remembering to do it that eventually, I sort of just thought I did until I got to school and discovered no pencils in my backpack. As I grew older, I came to understand that what the birds considered to be good or bad news was relative to my outlook. For example, when I moved with my family and was forced to attend a new high school 2 years into my high school education, I was a bit of an outcast. You know the story. New kid in school becomes the target of ridicule from the queen bee. This queen was named Casey Matthews and I grew to hate Casey. One morning I sat up in bed and listened to the day's news. When I heard that Casey Matthews was going to fall in gym, I was a bit surprised. I thought it was weird that the raven went first as the dove always took the lead. When I turned to the birds, however, the raven had just started its song and told me that I got a failing grade on the science test. I didn't want to think I was the type of person who would relish in another's pain, so I dismissed it as a fluke. I had done worse than just getting a failing grade on my test. I had gotten the lowest score in the class and was called out by the teacher for it. I could hear Casey snickering to her friends at the other end of the room. It put me in such a foul mood. As we shuffled off the gym class, we had to play basketball, something I was no good at. Everyone was running back and forth as I slowly paced from one end of the court to the other. I was watching Casey like a hawk. I wasn't even thinking of the prediction, I was just so fed up with her attitude. Even as everyone was trying to play the game, she mocked some of the heavier students, all while barely participating. She caught me looking at her and I shot her a fake smile. She rolled her eyes and turned away. As she turned, the basketball whipped by her head, and while it didn't hit her, it did throw her off balance. Even from where I was standing, I could tell it had broken and would create a nasty yellow bruise all over her face. That made me happy. The dove knew it was something worth singing about. Casey Matthews was a bitch. The next morning the dove told me that I would get a present in the mail, and I was pleased that the dove's song was actually pleasant. The raven, however, informed me that I wasn't the only thing that could hear their songs. I was perplexed, but I couldn't do anything about it. I can't converse with the birds, I can only listen. I wondered why that would be bad news. I stood for a while looking at the snow-white feather that laid on the brown cardboard, a feather that held the light of the sun with a familiar grace. The day flew by. I could only think about the songs I heard in the morning, about what else was listening to the songs. I became so concerned that something was invading this moment that I thought made me special. These birds were mine and no one else was supposed to listen to them. I wanted to get home, I wanted to sleep so I could try to get more information from their songs. With the help of a few sleeping pills, I was able to get to bed earlier than usual. My dreams were vivid. They were of the dark, but the dark was made from the feathers of the raven. They danced by me and tickled my face until I sprang up in my bed. Immediately I turned to the bird sitting on the window as the dove began to sing. It told me that I was going to live to see another morning, and the raven informed me that it was getting closer. In the past few days, the songs went something like this. The dove sang that I wouldn't have to water the garden. Which was true, the rain that day did it for me. The raven told me that it was going to find me that day. I don't know if that played out, but the raven was no liar. Yesterday, the dove sang to me and told me that the dove told me that it would always watch over me. The raven said that they couldn't protect me. The birds didn't leave the window for a while after their songs. They just kept chirping away, like they wanted me to remember what they sounded like. He told me that before I told them about the birds at my window, I would wake them up crying every night about the dog in my room. He couldn't remember how I described it with my limited vocabulary, only that it was as horrific as a child could make it. He told me he and Mom would console me every night. I wanted to write this all down before it gets too dark. This morning I woke up and listened to the songs my birds sang to me. I tried not to spend all day in bed. I tried to think of some way to go against the predictions, but it's never worked before. So I did my best to make peace and try to get down what I could, put it out there. I called my dad and told him I loved him, and now here I am. The songs playing in my head over and over. The dove told me that I would be with my mother once more.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
I don't like horror movies. In fact, I don't like anything horror. The sensation of being scared doesn't appeal to me. If I had to elaborate on why, and I typically did as a teenager when friends wanted to watch scary movies, I would say I saw enough as a kid and now they bore me. But when I continued to explain what I remembered from that old VHS tape, the recognition would slowly disappear from their face. Even while I described it, I knew it didn't make much sense. An egg-shaped man walking down the road with his arms waving all around the sky. A swan whose neck sways back and forth to the music in the background. Then, intermittent flashes of terrifying live-action footage. The audio consisted of mostly music with heavy static except for that one moment with the screaming man. As a child, you tend to go with the flow. I shake my head looking back at how accepting I was when she would put the TV on and stick the VHS in the VCR. She'd pat me on the head and say she's going to bed. I nodded and braced myself while also hoping that magically, this time, something else would be on that TV. She'd press play and then would leave for her bedroom. I was always mesmerized at this scene. The flowing animation and the bad audio. Something about it made you keep watching. The camera would pan out and slowly reveal the rest of the skeleton. There's no music now and the only audio is the sound of static popping noises. The video starts to zoom out and you see the entire skeletal frame on the screen. I was positive the skeleton would jump up or try to talk. It looked so alive with its jaw partially agape. The screen goes back to the cartoon, the broken-necked goose and the egg-shaped man, still waving his arms around, with the poor audio recording of the horns. At this point, a dancing bow-legged skeleton appears. They move about the dimensionless white space. The nonsensical dancing goes on for minutes before the music stops and all you can hear is the static popping sound again. All the characters look at the viewer, as though to make sure you were still watching. No longer a cartoon again, the face's lips were curled back and it was groaning on the screen. Looking back I wonder if it was a sick man. As a child I saw it as a zombie, its skin all decaying and missing in areas around his eyes and checks. The camera slowly zooms out and it shows that it's walking towards the camera, groaning and stumbling. Now my knees are tight against my chest and tears are making their way down my cheeks. I imagine the zombie grabbing me and rubbing its face against me. It will kill me this way and it will take me somewhere horrible and dark, far away from everyone I know. The Screaming Man. After laying in the subtle light of the television static, I would eventually fall asleep on the couch. The next morning my grandma would always ask me why I didn't make it to the guest bedroom. I'd say I fell asleep watching TV, but in actuality I was too terrified to make the impossibly long nighttime trek to the bedroom. On one of the days when my mom went to come get me, her and grandma ended up in the bedroom arguing. They kept it fairly quiet so I couldn't make out what they were saying from the kitchen. I lazily drew some fish around my shark when my mom came out in a huff and told me to say goodbye. I gave my grandma a hug and we got into the car and drove home. Like most kids, I didn't keep track of familial visits and it took a while before I realized I hadn't seen my grandma in years. When I was a few years older I asked my mom if she still talks to her. She looked up from the Better Homes and Gardens issue she was reading. Grandma has a lot of things going on in her life and visits are hard for her. I could tell she did not want to talk about it. I vaguely missed her, but at the same time it was easy to accept the reasoning that she was too busy for visits. 9-year-olds will believe most explanations. I went there with the copied key my mom had given me and walked through the front door. Immediately the smell of the house sent me back to all those years ago of picking tomatoes and drawing with crayons. I remembered the house being so large, but now it seemed cramped and small. I made my way through the kitchen and stopped for a moment to look at the round table and reminisce those lazy Sundays. Why I thought it might be in there I'm not sure, but I didn't want to think it was missing. I searched through the closet and some drawers. I looked under the bed but it was just shoe boxes filled with old letters and cards. I sat on the edge of the bed and scanned around the room. I saw something that only an old lady would have, a makeup table and chair set. I sat down in it and looked through the drawers in the table. Some half-used and new makeup but no tape. I looked through the 2 holes and in perfect view was the floral 3-cushioned couch where I used to watch that horrifying cartoon. I sat back in the chair and thought for a moment. It's possible these holes would be seen on the other side if you were looking, but the flowery wallpaper surely camouflaged them well. I looked through the holes again and saw the couch and television awashed in the morning light rays. Very different from how I experienced it. All I could see was a scared little boy sitting on that couch. He was wet from his own tears and hugging his knees to his chest. He was desperately hoping for Grandma to come rescue him, but deep down, he knew she never would.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back out now. Next story's already watching.
Fuck Oranges, by M59 Gar. We were at the bar for Connor's 22nd birthday when the world first began to fall apart. It started with an absurdly small detail. I ordered 2 blue moons for us like always, but he picked the orange slice off the rim of his glass with a frown. I looked down at the one on my glass and asked, something wrong? Across the table, Dan said, oranges are great, man. They're nature's candy. Near us, an older regular was watching a television above the bar. He sneered. Man, I'll tell you what's wrong with this country. It's them. He pointed at the screen. I hate them. Around him, fellow regulars cheered, and he grinned with pride. He held his hands up high and said, round of shots for the whole bar. On me. With relief, I saw that Connor was propped up on his bed by an array of pillows that kept him on his side. A trash can below him was filled halfway up with vomit, and Shannon sat in the corner on her phone. Upon seeing me, she said, "Oh, does your head hurt? Good. He's all yours now. I'm going home and going to sleep." And I was left feeling as if our roommate ritual for the entire last year had been some weird sort of lie that he'd grown tired of carrying on. I stewed on that feeling for the rest of the day. What if he didn't really consider me a friend? What if he was just humoring me because we were roommates? It felt as if my entire position in the group was in jeopardy, as if the way I thought of myself was under threat. It was a gnawing, lonely, and terrible feeling that kept me up all Sunday night. I hate oranges, I lied with a grimace. To my surprise, he said, me too. That was weird. Didn't you say they're nature's candy? Mortified, I asked, seriously. Dan just shrugged. Science says a lot of things are safe, then suddenly they find out they're not. I'm not eating anything that looks like that. I didn't agree with him, but the images had still unsettled me. Maybe there was a reason to avoid oranges after all. The rest of the gang showed up soon after, but the disturbing images never truly left my awareness. Later that night, as we all spilled out of an Uber in front of my place, we were laughing and joking again as normal, and I was starting to feel a little better. I'd overblown the whole issue, really. There was nothing to worry about. These people didn't secretly hate me, and I did belong. Across the street, one guy began yelling angrily at another. The Uber pulled away, removing the barrier between our group and the guys. We saw them push at each other, scream back and forth, and then begin trading punches. This was a nice college-age neighborhood where nothing of the sort had ever happened before. What were they thinking? We stared until they noticed us. Abruptly, they stalked off and returned to their separate houses, next to each other. They were neighbors. He didn't seem to be in any sort of deceptive or bad mood, so, once we were all sitting around the kitchen table drinking water, I took the opportunity to ask him about what had been bothering me. That was when it finally occurred to me that something was seriously wrong, either with my memory, or with the world. No longer smiling, I said, we've been getting that beer every time we go out since your birthday last year when that hot girl that night thought your joke about it being healthy was hilarious. His expression darkened. That never happened. I don't drink Blue Moon. That's how I remember it, I insisted flatly. Yeah, I laughed with him, secretly terrified. Rebecca and Dan finally looked up, relieved, and the mood immediately went back to happy and carefree. I hung out and pretended to be normal until everyone finally went to bed, Rebecca in her room downstairs, and Dan and Connor in the hallway next to my room, before I finally had a chance to investigate. For the first time in months, I closed and locked my door. The wonderful atmosphere that our house full of friends had started with was now one of fear and suspicion. I sat in the dark in front of my computer and began to scour the internet in search of answers. And because of that small and utterly inconsequential change, my home life and friends group were on the line. Was I going crazy? The only conclusion left was that I was the problem. Something was wrong with my memory or belief that had left me at odds with those I cared about. Just then, as I sat in the dark, I heard my doorknob turn, and failed to open, since I'd locked it. And something told me it wasn't for cuddling. It had been a subtle and stealthy attempt. On a horrified hunch, I quickly and quietly opened my window and slid out into the night. 5 houses down, I saw a roof ablaze. Someone's house was on fire. What the hell was happening? But I couldn't worry about that at that particular moment. Peering in another window, I saw a silhouette of darker darkness move near a gleam of metal. Someone had just tried to come into my room, with a knife. The silhouette disappeared into deeper shadow, leaving me with no identity beyond the fact that it had to have been one of my roommates. How in the ever-blazing hell had a like or dislike of oranges come to such a point? This was not normal. This was not natural. Crouched out there in the chilly night, illuminated only by the house fire 5 lots distant, I was forced to face the only conclusion left: something supernatural was going on. As soon as I truly entertained that notion, the firelit darkness felt suddenly far less solitary. Were eyes upon me? Was something watching me even then? I found it hard to believe that hating oranges was the primary goal of whatever was happening, rather, just the side effect of a slowly creeping insanity or possession of some sort. I didn't get a chance to catch Rebecca alone until Wednesday. She was the first to show up to the bar that evening, like Dan had been on Monday, but she seemed uncomfortable and apprehensive. After she looked over her shoulder for the third time at the entrance to the bar, I asked quietly, "Are you afraid, too?" "What is the oranges thing?" I demanded in a whisper. "What is going on?" Half panicked at my questions, she insisted, "Just tell them you hate oranges, alright? Just freaking tell them you hate oranges. Stop asking about it, stop poking at it. I like my life. I like you guys. I like my house. Stop disrupting everything." She finally looked me in the eyes, and I saw bloodshot exhaustion there. Her eyes opened a little wider. She went to speak, but she saw someone come in the back door of the bar and quickly pulled her hand away from mine. Connor fell upon me rather forcefully from behind, but only to wrap his arm around my shoulder and neck. "Ooh, what are you two lovebirds up to?" He knew we weren't a thing anymore. What was his problem? Following the cue from Rebecca's masked terror, I said, "Just talking about how much we hate oranges, bro." Dan arrived soon after, complaining of a vendor selling oranges he'd seen on the way over. "Grossest pile of disease you've ever seen." He shuddered. And someone else. There, among the crowded patrons of the bar, and shown only in choppy frame-by-frame rendering, was the shadow of a person bent down near Connor's ear. The silhouette turned a half-step and vanished as if a gust of wind had dissipated it in one fell swoop. My friends smiled and made faces. The flash irritated a few surrounding patrons, but I'd gotten away with it. And there was something among us. Holy Christ, a literal shadow whispering in Connor's ear, murmuring insidious words of hatred, no doubt. As the Uber pulled onto our street that night, I absently studied the blackened shell of the house that had caught on fire 5 lots down. It was still smoldering, and it looked like nobody had come to put it out. In fact, it looked like nobody lived there at all. Looking left and right, I noticed that half of the houses on our street had no cars in their driveways. We weren't so fancy as to have garages. These thoughts plagued me that night and all the next day. At work on Thursday, while my coworkers randomly cried in their cubicles or had hushed discussions that broke up as soon as a manager neared, I sat on my computer and researched paranormal possessions and hauntings. One of the things I learned was that demonic beings, that is, entities from a religious sphere of ideas, hated signs of God and good, and tried to get those they were trying to possess to destroy crosses and pour out holy water and the like. That made sense. Thursday night wasn't one of our usual bar nights, so I was at home when Rebecca's older sister Shannon stopped by. It was for something trivial, but on the way out, I caught her on the porch. I needed reassurance. "Hey, Shannon, you remember that whole conversation about oranges versus beets last Saturday?" She rolled her eyes. "Yeah. What about it?" She scrolled through Facebook on her phone, then showed me a picture. "Look, it's the two of you on his 21st birthday last year, when I was designated driver as usual." As she turned to leave, we began to hear a commotion at the end of the street closer to campus. We were only a few blocks away from campus, and still close enough that street vendors often passed this way. When I saw an older man pushing a cart of oranges being surrounded by a group of my peers shouting profanities, I knew exactly what was happening. And I could see Dan and Connor among them. Rebecca came out onto the porch at hearing the violent shouting, and the three of us stood staring as the mob began to push at the unfortunate cart owner. We started running toward the fray after Dan sent a wild punch, and the man fell. The mob was screaming with furious bloodlust and stomping en masse by the time we got there. Shannon looked at me in confused askance. But Rebecca, terrified as she was, chose to join in. Running forward, she started screaming profanities and stomping on the last of the oranges while the others began cheering. Soon, they would notice that we had not joined in. She took my advice immediately and began walking away toward her car. I got here too late, I lied lamely. Dan, his gaze red with anger, fixated on me as well. There's one left. He held his arms out. Everybody leave that one. He pointed down. Come on. The orange splattered under my shoe, and arms grasped me from every angle as my neighbors jeered and cheered. I opened my eyes and shook with shame as the cart owner got up and ran off. Dan lit a match and set the wooden cart on fire while the others began dancing. I had no choice but to dance with them. They wouldn't let go of me. They shook me and made me chant with them and tested me constantly to make sure I wasn't faking. To get through it, I had to temporarily convince myself they were right and that oranges were an abomination. To get through it, I had to give up part of myself, and, after, I returned to my room, locked the door, and sat crying under my computer table. When Dan got home that night, I caught him behind the front door and held a knife to his throat. Sit down, I directed, tying him up on a chair in the kitchen. I didn't grab her. I didn't tie her up. I simply held the knife and said, sit. They're disgusting. That didn't happen. It happened. I screamed in his face. Eat the orange. He pulled his head away. They're the highest carriers of disease among all. But we hate oranges, Connor insisted, indignant. Right, guys? Dan bit down on the sock in his mouth. Connor seemed more shaken after that. After gulping down hesitation, he warily took a bite from the orange. He blinked. Oh. It's fine. Dan seemed surprised, and Rebecca just cried harder. Seeing Connor break, Dan hesitantly tried a bite, and then pushed back in his chair. That doesn't taste like I remember. I swear it used to have a horrible antiseptic taste. No, I told him. Our heads are being messed with. We just attacked a street vendor and stomped on his oranges because we've been worked up in a frenzy of hate. Does that make any sense to you objectively? Blinking as if waking up from a dream, Dan began to look horrified. Oh my God, we did do that, didn't we? What were we thinking? I stared. Buy lemons? I hesitated. Why would you even care about that? It couldn't be so absurd as that, could it? Had some lemon farming company hired a demon worshipper and summoned an entity from beyond our world just for profit? Had they brought the incarnation of hate among us just to make money? But it was that simple. It had always been that simple. Why else would anyone do anything? We all remained frozen in shock for 30 seconds before Dan snapped out of it and said loudly, "Would someone please untie me already?" As a group, we didn't know what else to do, so we went and sat at our regular table at the bar. It was early on a Thursday, so few other people were there. We didn't get blue moons, but not because we hated oranges. No, our house was full of hundreds of the fruit, and would smell forever. I can't believe it almost got us to go from loving oranges to hating them in less than a week, Connor murmured sadly, crouched over his drink. She looked at me, I looked at her. We both looked back down at our beers. She hadn't just moved through it. She'd jumped at it because of me. We both knew the answer, but that was private. The four of us shouted in unison. He jumped in his chair and looked over at us. "Don't," I told him calmly and sadly. "Please. Just don't." Blog, FB, TW.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock, knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine, stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
My Dad Sold My Soul to the Devil, by Death by Kalaidman. My dad is what they call a macho man. All he wanted was sons. He lived and breathed for another Keller boy. Naturally, when my older brother was born, he was overjoyed. 3 years later, he begged my mom to have another son. When he found out we were twins, he was excited to have 3 sons. So when my brother and I came out, and he saw that I was a girl, he was despaired. I've always been his least favorite kid, and he never tried to hide it. When I was 4, Dad got cancer. And from what I heard, it was supposed to be terminal. That's where the title of this story comes into play. I was in my tiny, cramped room, trying to sleep on a bed I outgrew years ago, while my brothers and Dad watched a movie downstairs, when I saw it. I immediately cried for my dad, who stormed up the stairs and gave me a proper beating for interrupting his movie night with his kids. After that, he called me a little girl for crying and locked me in my room. As I cried all that night, the demons simply watched me from the closet, unmoving. After a while, I stopped being scared of them. The demon, who now looked at me with something more than curiosity, looked back at my closed door, trying to see my dad. As I did nothing but sob, the demon just sat down beside my bed, towering over me. Neither of us looked at each other the rest of the night. I cried while he just stared off in the distance, but I wasn't alone, and that was all I cared about. From then on things changed. Papa. At first he stepped back, but as I cried even harder, he looked at me in the eyes, maybe for the first time since that night he stepped out of the closet. Then he did something surprising. He stood up, revealing his giant stature, and David began to cry, while Anthony froze in place and my dad ran off to get a vial of holy water he had kept by his bed ever since the deal was made. I watched in horror as Papa, who had stayed by my side all these years, faded to nothingness. Dad turned around slowly, looking to this thing as he glared down at my abuser. "Your Majesty, I dash. We had a deal, Stanley. I granted you 15 more years of life, on 2 conditions. 2. It boomed, and I noticed David had wet himself. My dad got down on his knees. "No, please, I'll do anything," he begged. "It's up to you, Lilith," Satan said. I looked to Papa's body on the floor, then back to my dad. "Come on, you gonna believe Satan, or your dear old dad?" my dad said, pleading to me. And with that, Satan dragged my dad down to the netherworld, my brothers, and I hearing his screams until it was far away enough that it faded away, to where he could never hurt me again. As my brothers cried in the loss of their dad, I walked back to Papa, on the ground, and kissed his forehead.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back down now. Next story's already watching.
The Russians Dug the World's Deepest Hole, Now I Know Why, by Richard Saxon. On the 24th of May, 1970, the Soviet Union started a project that would be known as the Kola Super Deep Borehole. Although it has been long since abandoned, the hole still exists today, and measures about 40,000 feet in depth. Be it for research or whatever claim have been told, the Kola borehole is not the only time Russia dug further than they should have, and several holes can still be found today, unprotected in the desolate Russian wilderness. My Russian language abilities were less than satisfactory, and considering only 2 people beside my crew spoke English in the village, it was a challenge to say the least. However, with the right spirit and willingness to share a bottle of vodka, they were some of the friendliest people I'd met in my entire life. I particularly enjoyed the company of the village's only police officer, Vadim, who happened to speak at least a basic level of English. His job mostly consisted of escorting people home after they had a bit too much to drink, although he oftentimes partook in the drinking rather than stopping it. Needless to say, we quickly became good friends. We rather enjoyed ourselves in such a bizarre world, cut off from civilization. At least we did until the 9th month of our deployment. It was the first time I had seen Vadim efficiently work to put together a rescue operation. Calling for official aid so far out was a hopeless task. Even if they sent help, they would arrive too late. While the mechanics attempted to revive the old machinery, including the elevator, I attached a sinker to a line in hopes of measuring the depth. The line wasn't long enough to determine where the bottom was, even though the longest ropes combined measured almost 1,000 feet. Ready? Vadim asked us. The suits were poorly fitted to our slightly untrained figures and chafed in places I didn't know it was possible. We entered the lift, which was protected by a rusty metal cage full of holes. We were given only one walkie-talkie to communicate with the people on the surface, in addition to some old flashlights. "We're ready, lower us down," Stanley said. We descended. "You think this is dark, wait till you see winter in village," Vadim said, his usual dull humor. Me and Stanley both faked a chuckle. "Oh, they just ask how deep we are." "Very strange," Vadim mumbled to himself. Something about Vadim seemed off. I had never seen him worried like that before. "Pomagite!" A soft voice cried out from the depths below. Someone called for help from below. I hear nothing. I put a finger to my lips, gesturing for silence while listening attentively. Then I heard the voice again. Of course, but it was in English. It wasn't too unusual for the children to pick up on an English word or two while we were visiting, but this wasn't that. It didn't make sense for a young girl to know that word, not in a tiny Siberian village. If someone had really called out from the bottom, we should have reached it already. "Light, at bottom, look." He frantically jumped up and down while pointing towards the darkness below. "There's nothing there, Vadim," Stanley said. "How can you not see, it's so bright?" I glanced over at Stanley in confusion. My first thought was that Vadim was going crazy due to the heat and darkness. 5,000 feet. None of us had said a single word since Vadim told us about the light. Our moods were descending much faster than the elevator. On top of that, my headache was almost killing me. A few seconds passed while I came back to it, and I saw Stanley lying unmoving next to me. Vadim, however, was nowhere to be found. "Stan, are you all right?" I shook his shoulder. He grunted as he sat back up. "What the hell just happened?" "I don't know, man, but Vadim's gone." I clicked a few buttons on the panel. He was quite a bit older than myself, so he was rapidly deteriorating from the heat. "I don't know. Is it even possible to be this far down?" I was about to pass out for the nth time myself. I was only jolted back into consciousness by what sounded like singing. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard, in Russian, and I didn't understand what it was about, but it was so serene, so pure. "Stan!" I called out with my fading voice. "Can you hear that?" "Who's singing?" he mumbled, half asleep. A light appeared in the depths, and the singing got louder. The elevator stopped once more. Stan was gone. Just like Vadim, he had vanished into thin air, but the light remained, the beautiful warm light. It started moving towards me, and the closer it got, the more at peace I felt. Then there was nothing. When I called them, their numbers were all either disconnected or reached completely unrelated people. When I returned home, I discovered that my house was owned by someone else, and had been for at least 10 years. It took me a long time to figure out what had happened, but some changes were too big to be a horrible coincidence.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
I'm a dentist for monsters, and last night I took on a new patient, by Nudatown JM. I'm going to get straight to the point. Monsters are real. All of them. You might think you know a lot about them, but you don't. The stories and legends got so much wrong, and I've had the privilege of getting to learn the truth about most of them. For example, no self-respecting vampire would be caught dead, or alive, standing at your door waiting for an invite. And shapeshifters do not change once a month and howl at the moon. That's just ridiculous. And the popular ones are just the tip of the iceberg. Do with that information what you will. One thing that the stories did get right, however, was the teeth. Sharp, crowded, tall, tiny. They all have them, and sometimes they need attention. A monster without teeth loses a huge percentage of its scare factor in an instant. It's something they pay handsomely to avoid. That creature that's haunted your nightmares, the one with a few too many teeth. Real. And probably in acute oral pain. Regardless, the risk is very real. I was reminded of that last night during my appointment with a new patient. It left me somewhat shaken, a rarity in my field. Thankfully, I was able to charge double for the inconvenience, triple if I had to travel. Often the astronomical price turned out to be entirely justified, and this was no different. My receptionist, Coco, had booked him in. I love her to pieces, and she's a true friend, who has the best of intentions, but she's truly terrible at the basics of her job. She never collects the relevant information for new sign-ups and doesn't ask any questions that might prepare me. Mr. Eurastix was booked in for 11 p.m. He wanted the full cover of darkness for his arrival. That was all Coco knew. Blackout blinds down, I prepped the room, knots forming in my stomach. Water's fine. You're mad, aren't you? I'm sorry, Day. How the fuck are you supposed to ask someone what kind of monster they are? I feel rude. Coco was always worried about offending. It was sweet, but useless. You could at least ask what the problem is. Didn't you learn from the incident with the woman of the water? Traipsed me all the way out to a rock pool with a bag of tools and no informa dash. Within milliseconds she was floored and totally winded. The door was left swinging with not a soul to be seen. Great. I squinted, searching for a minuscule creature, or something translucent perhaps, but nothing. Instead there was a sinister, high-pitched voice from behind me, inches from my left ear. It sounded like one of those cringe-worthy, over-enthused children's TV presenters, and it made my skin crawl. Nice to meet you, Doctor. My name is Mozaf Eurastix. You can call me Mo if you prefer. His presence cooled the immediate area around me, and Coco wrenched herself up from the ground to bolt the door shut. I would have gone to help her, but I assure you she'd faced much worse whilst working with me, and I felt there were more pressing matters in the moment. Instead, I turned to face my newest patient. But Mo had a fleshy face. He had striking red irises, with pupils that were shaped differently to a human. Over the top of his eyes was a thin, fleshy layer that created a veiny, translucent veil. As if an eyelid had formed but never separated, leaving him with his own protective eye windows. The same paper-thin skin veiled the opening to his mouth, ever so slightly muffling his high-pitched words and failing to conceal a perfectly circular arrangement of small, razor-sharp teeth. His mouth didn't move like you would expect, instead the voice projected from the back of his throat and through the skin. Where most people would be horrified, I was fascinated. There's a certain point in an industry like mine where you're entirely desensitized to the horrific sights of these monsters. I'd never seen one like Mo before. I wasn't scared, more curious. Welcome Mo. I think you owe my employee here an apology, don't you? I stared him firmly in the eyes. Dr. Danworth. I stretched out a cautious hand. This was something I did often. I was always fascinated to see their hands. Mo's were like mine. Except for the thin, veiny pieces of skin that connected each finger. It made a change from the array of claws I'd become accustomed to. Can I get you a coffee, sir? Coco beamed, unfazed as ever. It was the kind of moment that reminded me why I kept her around. Top-notch customer service, however useless her admin was. Let's get straight to it then, follow me. Please tell me a bit about yourself and what I can do for you. Whoa. I wasn't expecting a date, doctor. What do you want to know? His voice was cheeky and came laced with giggles, but something about it still made my skin crawl. It was as if Mo sucked all the joy out of the room. Some of them had that effect. He looked at me as if I was supposed to be in some kind of deep shock, but I'd kept geckos as a kid. When a gecko sheds its skin, it does it in one go like it's taking off a tiny cardigan, then they consume the remains. It's highly nutritious. Mo's red eyes were quite reptilian. I stupidly thought at that stage that I had him all worked out. You just need to cut this, Doc. He nonchalantly pointed at the flap of skin stretched across his circular jaw. The rest should dislodge easy, then you can get to work on the teeth. Isn't it obvious? I did tell your receptionist. Mo rolled his red eyes behind their horrendous fleshy windows. That's what I thought, but I didn't say it. I would never lament her in front of a patient. I inspected what I could see of the rounded jaw and gathering of pointed teeth through the lamp and tried to ponder what he could possibly want. I eat brains. He answered in the most unassuming voice I'd ever heard. I gulped but didn't respond. I picked up my scalpel and prodded at the excess skin covering his rounded jaw with the point. Despite its delicate appearance, even with force it remained infallible. Within minutes I found myself viciously stabbing at my patient's mouth. Yet another occurrence I hadn't expected in dental school. He sucked in with the ferociousness of an angry Henry Hoover as he consumed his own flesh as it ripped to reveal fresh, raw skin. The scene was truly horrific. But as the thin windows of skin peeled away from Mo's eyes to reveal a brilliant scarlet, he looked truly satisfied. Better? I asked, as Mo slurped the final bloodied pieces of himself down. He nodded with glee. I can't wait for a real meal now. I've been so hungry. He looked at me like dinner. I held in vomit as I tried to get a look at his now unobstructed teeth. Well, if you want to enjoy a real meal, then you won't make one of me before your teeth are done. I laughed nervously and he delighted at my discomfort. Of course I did. I fucking hated that guy. He was the patient I always dreaded, and now he'd sent me another living nightmare. I could see that he knew I was lying. Although he couldn't contort his circular mouth, it was in the eyes. I've found that even in the most monstrous of eyes there is emotion. People say that they're windows to the soul, but they're also windows to the soulless. I picked up my file and got to work. The jaw was solid and perfectly fused into its shape. Lining the entire edge were around 80 roughly 3-inch long, incisor-shaped teeth. They had clearly been blunted with time, but it didn't make them or him any less intimidating. I tried not to give too much thought to the poor victims that would fall prey to those particular teeth. I couldn't work out how he got to the brain, but I was certain that it wasn't pretty. Nasty, but natural. Think of it like the food chain of the animal kingdom, it's just the part no one talks about. I put my all into my work and soon found myself faced with a perfect set of monster gnashes, if I do say so myself. With his red raw hands he ran his fingers along the jagged edges of his teeth, checking that each individual one was to his liking. It made me incredibly nervous, watching him scrutinize my masterpiece. "They're perfect," he uttered under his breath. I smiled sweetly, determined to get the patient out of my practice and into the world, away from me. Thud. Mo looked up at her in shock, steadying himself on his raw hands. His tone wasn't genuinely apologetic at all. Desperately shaken, I waited with bated breath as he reached into his cloak pocket and handed a stack of cash to Coco. "It's time you leave, Mr. Urastics. I can recommend a colleague in the industry for further appointments, but I won't be continuing to treat you." I opened up the bolted door and gestured for him to leave. "Oh doctor, whether or not you treat me we will meet again, I assure you." My relief soon turned sour. I hadn't noticed the drunken gentleman walking along the path, but Mo certainly had. I ran towards my patient, but before I could make it outside to try and help he latched his ring of fangs around the man's scalp. The bite was followed by an almighty crunch, deadening the screams. "Thanks doc, I feel so much better now. I'll tell the beast you said hello." He practically chirped those words. Then he was gone. Disappeared. Mo had moved so fast and destroyed the passer-by with such deadly precision, I realized that if he had wanted me dead then I would have been. And his final words, about the beast. It made me wonder if the beast of Coeur d'Alene Hill had sent him in the first place. It's terrible, but this hadn't been the first fatality on my watch because of a patient, and my guilt was unfathomable.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
Weird Shit I've Seen as a Marine 1, by 035 None. Growing up playing video games and watching war movies, I didn't think twice about joining the Marines so I could be in the infantry. I went through all of the training and unwelcome hardship that makes you really reconsider your decision. Anyway, I got stationed to a desert base known as 29 Palms, the largest piece of militarily controlled land in the U.S. It covers approximately 930 square miles in total. It's fucking huge, in Southern California, and a few hours from Mexico. When you're out that far, you start to see some shit. I'm suddenly woken up after what felt like 10 minutes and I get up instantly. "Get up bitch, you're on watch." God damn it. I get dressed and I stand my post dutifully like I'm told at the checkpoint. I'm given a radio and told to only lift the barbed wire after it gets approved over the radio. It's maybe around 2 a.m. and everyone else in my company is dead asleep except for myself and an officer in the comm truck. All I can hear are the coyotes. I decide to start looking at the stars with my night vision. I hear a coyote yelp off in the distance and think nothing of it. A few minutes later, another Marine comes over a small hill in front of me. Nothing crazy, probably taking a dump. He walks towards me but his eyes don't really reflect light. Rationally, One of us is probably dehydrated, so I think nothing of it. He approaches me, and after a few seconds of staring at me, he simply says, "Maine, this is Road Guard 1. There is a SGT right requesting entry. Over." Road Guard 1, this is Maine. There is no SGT right in this company, and the closest unit is 25 miles away. Make sure, shit, get the fuck back here right now. Don't let him or even look at him. Run.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
I, 33M, live in Texas with my daughter, Alicia, 8F, and my son Jay, 4M. Their mom has been out of the picture for the past 2 years, not dead, just a piece of shit, and I've managed pretty well as a single father. The three of us lived in a 2-bedroom in a nice neighborhood. I've got a solid job, and the kids are thankfully healthy. I asked Alicia if she'd seen anything, and she shook her head. Those words, and the fear in my daughter's voice, really put me on edge. Only a little, but it's 'cause I heard a weird noise. What did you hear? Alicia couldn't recall exactly. According to her, she had gotten out of bed to see what was going on, and when she lifted the curtain, she saw a light on in the neighbor's window. The curtains in the back room had been drawn back, and our neighbor was standing in his house, right up against the window frame. What was he doing? The next morning, before work and after dropping Alicia and Jay off to school, I spent a good 5 minutes knocking on my neighbor's front door. I figured he was home since his car was in the driveway, but he never answered the door. Eventually I had to leave for work, and as I was walking away, I turned around quickly to see if he was watching me. He was, the coward. I saw him for a split second at the front window before he ducked beneath the sill and out of view. Clearly, the guy had problems. I yelled out to him to stop fucking with us and then left. The man grabbed the window and slammed it shut, then closed the curtains with the same forcefulness. I let my own curtain fall. I was a little shell-shocked, I think. Of course, I was perturbed by the sight of the man, by his face and his movement, and the fact that he'd been doing that for who knows how many nights now in an attempt to frighten my kids. However, another detail stuck out as even more concerning to me, which was the fact that I genuinely wasn't sure if the man I had just seen was my neighbor. I'd seen him so few times in the years I'd lived in that house, and I was having trouble conjuring up his face. I sat on the floor for a minute, my blood thundering in my ears. I definitely had enough evidence at that point to call the cops, right? Just as I was about to pull out my phone, I heard a tremendous smack against the glass of the bedroom window. I sat on the edge of my bed, my firearm ready and my ears straining. My kid's tent was in the corner, and to the left of the tent, in the middle of the wall and directly across from where I sat, was a window. After what felt like an eternity, I saw something. It was a cloudless night, and the moonlight was bright enough that I could see a silhouette through the white curtains. The dark shape was nebulous at first, but became more clear as the man outside stepped closer to the window. Somehow, he knew which room we were in. The silhouette didn't move for several minutes, and I remember being thankful that, from the angle at which she sat, Alicia couldn't see it. Thud. 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 I'm not sure what they found inside that house. All I know is that when they emerged a few moments later, they both looked very disturbed. When I went outside to ask what they had found, the female officer told me simply, "Your neighbor's dead."
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
My friend Alex loves partying. He organized a party at his parents' place for New Year's Eve and wanted to make it the biggest one yet, since his parents were out of town. He invited a bunch of friends and told them to invite their own friends, with the only condition being that they should bring some booze. His parents have a luxurious house, which has enough room for 2 entire football teams, so Alex wasn't overly concerned about the place being crowded. I leaned in and shouted in his ear, so that he could hear me over the loud music. I repeated my question, and once he glanced at the girl, he said, "I don't know her name, man. But Matt's been with her, says she's a beast in bed." "Ha," I said, catching the girl's gaze once more. I had just ended a 3-year-long relationship, so I wasn't really looking for anything serious. A one-night stand sounded like a perfect way to end the shitty year that was 2019. Alex leaned in to shout something in my ear. Alex shrugged. His attention went to another friend that passed by, and I was left alone with my own thoughts, as difficult as they were to be heard in such a loud place. Matt was pretty picky with women, so having another girl that isn't to his liking was no big news. I realized that the girl was still staring at me with a seductive smile, so I allowed the alcohol in my blood to give me the surge of courage I needed to approach her. We introduced each other and made some shallow small talk. She said her name was Melissa, and after a few brief exchanges, I asked her to dance. She said yes, spurring me to try and take things even further. As we danced, things started getting more heated between us, and at one point, Melissa wrapped her arms around my shoulders and leaned in, as she said. She bit her lip as she said so and continued dancing gently. "I got an apartment. Not too far away, we can use my car," I said, my boner practically talking instead of me. Wait. Before we do this, there are some things you need to know about me." She gently pushed me away, blushing and panting, and said. I was so horny at that moment I just wanted to jump on her, but I nodded and agreed to let her speak. She sat upright on the couch and exhaled, before she said. "Oh great," I thought to myself. "She has STD or something." She continued. I frowned in confusion, but before I could ask anything, she continued. "If you feel my grip getting painfully firm on you, like claws, stop moving and I'll gradually let you go. After we are done having sex, I will ask you some questions, like how it was for you, have you had any better partners, how many girls you slept with, etc. I will need you to answer this as truthfully as possible. I'll know if you lie. Once we are ready to go to bed, put a piece of any kind of raw meat out of the fridge on the counter and leave it there overnight. If you wake up and I'm not there, call out to me. You're going to hear one of the following things, either me saying that I'll be right back or calling you to come out. Ignore the latter, that's not me. And last, but most important rule, make sure to set your alarm and wake up at exactly 6:06 a.m. If you see me still in bed by then, covered with the blanket over my head, get out of the apartment as quietly as you can. I will be out of your apartment by 6:05 a.m., no exceptions." She exhaled, staring at me in anticipation. I stared back, with mouth agape. I hadn't even realized how dumbfounded and breathless I was until she finished. "So, do you have any questions?" She shrugged. While there, I texted Matt. "Hey bro, you know a girl named Melissa?" His response came almost immediately. I said, "Did you invite her home?" The message made me feel uneasy. I started to type, when his next message came through. Fuck. Matt replied. He said, "You have to go through with her rules now. Don't kick her out before she decides to leave on her own. She will be out of there by 6:05 a.m. Bro, what are you talking about? I'll just tell her I'm not feeling well and send her home." "Don't do that. Listen to me, don't fucking do it." He immediately responded. He typed for a moment, before saying, "Because my friend Kit did it. And they found him dead in his bed 2 days ago."
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
I was born deaf, but had my hearing restored. I'm now hearing things I'm not supposed to, by Gray Building 679. There was always that lingering feeling of disappointing them, even though I excelled at school, had a great job and married a dream of a husband, named Teddy. I think that is why I agreed to the surgery. I wanted to finally make them happy, give them the daughter they always wanted. A perfect daughter, that could hear. It was a restorative experimental procedure, that was to be performed by a renowned otolaryngologist named Dr. Wilson Hubbard, who was based near my hometown, on the outskirts of Seattle. The doctor was very clear, there was a high probability of failure, and that he was still working on the nuances of the operation. At my parents' insistence, and pocketbook, he agreed to take me on as a patient, clearing his schedule. It all happened so fast, that Teddy was unable to get off of work, so I was forced to fly out of Boston by myself, greeting my hopeful but anxious parents in Seattle. We went to the hospital where Dr. Hubbard dumbed down the surgery to the most pedestrian of terms. I nodded along, not really taking in anything he was saying. The night before the operation, I lay on my old bed, FaceTiming Teddy. I had become acutely skilled at reading lips over the years. "I love you too," I said, signing with my hands, before turning off the lights and drifting to sleep. "How are you feeling, Callie?" said Dr. Hubbard, stroking his white beard. He reminded me of a slimmed-down version of the KFC Colonel Sanders. "I'm okay, there's some pain in my..." I stopped, and Dr. Hubbard gave me an amused smile. I can hear my voice," I stammered. "Oh my God." My mom's face turned ashen. "No dear, nobody said anything about your voice." She gripped her glass of Chardonnay, taking a long sip. I turned my attention towards her, and could hear something else. It was a sound that I would later identify as a squeaky wheel, a low ambient noise, almost undetectable. There was something else too, a hushed but warm hum, bum, 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 a bum, bum, bum. Mashed potatoes. I looked over to my dad, who was heaping another spoonful of potatoes on his plate. I caught his glance, and he gave me a small wave. I saw the man arrested, and the girl, whoever she was, rescued. To my relief, as the bag was removed, the music that was so faint, increased in volume. I left before the police could ask me any questions. "Just curious, what is my sound?" he said. It was not long afterwards, though, that I thought differently about the sounds. I looked at him in horror, the children's cries echoing in my head, even louder now. My beloved Teddy, my husband, and bearer of the worst sound in the world.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
My Amazon Alexa does more than just laugh, by IIA. I went back to my book. 20 minutes later, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Alexa's blue ring illuminate, as if she'd received a command. I studied her for a few seconds and shrugged it off. Screw this, I thought, and got up to shut her off. As I crossed the room, her lights flashed. "Okay, Peter, for units of Clorox bleach, 121 ounces bottles, is on its way. You should have it in a couple days." I stopped in my tracks and stared at the device. After a quick shower, I was toweling off and thinking about what I had to do at work the next day when Alexa started to talk again. I couldn't hear her very well through the bathroom door, but I recognized her voice. It didn't sound like she was reciting another order. It almost sounded like conversation. I watched TV in bed for a little while, hoping I'd get tired enough to fall asleep. It wasn't working. I couldn't stop thinking about the stupid device. I wasn't going to shut it down, though. I wasn't going to give in to my baseless fear. I'm an adult, damn it. During my third Frasier rerun, I finally felt myself getting ready to sleep. I turned off the TV and closed my eyes. Okay Peter, Sunshades Depot 5-foot by 7-foot tarp is on its way. You should have it in a couple days. I tore the plug from the outlet and Alexa went silent. The light went out. You know that Amazon Alexa thing? I asked, pointing in its direction. Oh yeah, she replied. My sister has one. Did you hear about how some people are reporting that it laughs? That's what mine does. I exclaimed. Toshi paused mid-drink. She looked at me, her smile slipping from her face. Peter, she repeated. Tosh, what's going on? Yeah. And? She stared into my eyes, almost like she didn't want to say. She shook her head. No. Worse. Tell me, Tosh. I felt myself getting dizzy. Tarp. I parroted. Bleach.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
I went back inside, and puked into the kitchen sink. I had no plan, no cover story. Some nosy neighbor might have spotted me digging, or heard Lucy screaming. I spent most of the afternoon alternating between the bottom of a bottle and sitting on my bed sobbing, waiting to hear sirens. I downed half a bottle of pills only to throw them up minutes later. I was losing my mind. At some point, I must have passed out from exhaustion. The next morning, I awoke to the smell of frying bacon. I hadn't touched my food. Something about the lingering image, real or not, of burying the dead corpse of my wife had robbed me of my appetite. Lucy kept encouraging me to eat, but I just wasn't in the mood. However, I noticed that she wasn't eating either. I commented on it, but she just kept rambling on about TV like she hadn't heard me. Just in time to see her lunging towards me with a knife. I don't completely remember what happened next. There was a struggle. The next thing I knew, I was standing over the body of my wife, who lay motionless on the kitchen floor. My arms and wrists were covered in cuts, but the knife was buried in the stomach of Lucy. Blood was everywhere. As I tried to staunch the flow of my own blood, I was terrified. What was going on? Why had Lucy tried to kill me? Didn't she know that I had already killed her? After I bandaged my arms, I checked the pancakes on the kitchen table. I couldn't tell for sure, but after cutting them open and examining them closer, I thought I could smell a faint trace of rat poison. I was unsure what to do now. I almost called the police. The next morning, Lucy was sleeping peacefully next to me in bed when I awoke. Again, no wounds, no sign of injury at all. In fact, she looked beautiful. More beautiful than she had in years. Her eyes opened. "Good morning, honey," she said, smiling. "I have a present for you." She went to reach for something next to the bed. I grabbed my pillow and smashed it down over her face. I held it there, long after her frantic movements had ceased. After I was certain she was dead, I looked at what she had been reaching for. A loaded gun lay on the nightstand. Lucy's rotting, decomposing face grinned up at me. Maggots wriggled over her, and the stench was overwhelming. She had been dead for days. "Please, stop. Lucy, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it." I didn't mean it. Please, just stay dead.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
Thispersondoesnotexist.com by Darwin Demon. This website is real, trust me. Try going on it, if you don't. You can generate faces of people who don't exist, via an AI. Sounds cool, catfishing bait, etc. I thought so too. I looked at my messages, my gallery. All empty. Was this some cruel joke? Was my boyfriend pranking me for Valentine's Day? Would he kiss another girl for a prank? Knowing him, and his dedication to his foolhardy ways, he probably would. I guess it was just wishful thinking then, but I went up to him, shook him and said, through sobs, I know it's a prank. I'm crying now, please stop it. The one thing he wouldn't ever do is let me cry, and when he didn't react at all, I knew that there was no prank. I couldn't understand it. I knew I existed. I don't think anyone else did though. And then, when I tried to recall my name, I had no idea. I opened Facebook, there was no login. No email accounts either. Panicking, I opened Reddit. I am still logged in here, I guess anonymity has its benefits. I have no way of finding my name or anything that identifies me from this account. I don't know what to do, where to go. I don't know if I will always just be around, being no one and nothing, or if I will vanish by the time you all read this. All I know, is that I exist. And hopefully, some internet strangers know now too. Help me find me.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
I kill one person per year, it's my job, by Nutty Peasant. So, you think your husband is trying to kill you? Yes. He is, I know it. I know he took life insurance policies out of me. Well, we did it together, actually. He is, just trust me. You'll be paid really well. Listen, I don't trust people who are trying to kill someone else. You have to prove to me that 1, you have proof that he's trying to kill you, and 2, prove that his life insurance policy is real as well. Mrs. Goodrim, we are here in a place of business. If you don't like my services, you can ask any of the other hunters in this place, but if you are being rude to me, then consider yourself refused. She sat back down, looking down, showing some sign of remorse. Yes. 20% of the life insurance policy, right? In cash. Alright, now do you have any other proof that he's trying to kill you? How is this proof? This just shows a man offering to take his wife out for dinner. Do you not understand? He's trying to lure me to a restaurant. He doesn't care, he'd get to cash in my life insurance policy. Do you not understand? Look. Mrs. Goodrim, I'm just here to do a job. Whether you can prove to me that this case is a legit one is up to you. Whether I decide to take the job is up to me. Listen, you mongrel. I put $100,000 on your table to kill my husband, and I expect him to be dead by the morning. Alright, wait. Mrs. Goodrim looked at me with anger, as if she just lost a bet worth $100,000. Well, I still have to make sure that this is a sound case to take on. Share, send it to the client please. After about 5 minutes. And number X200B. Ding. Here, take this. Without a second thought, she takes the pill and puts it in her mouth, takes the water bottle and gushes it with water before swallowing it. Okay, now what? On the left, it showed that her life insurance policy paid $1 million and that I would get a 25% cut. On the right was a handwritten note saying that she was deathly allergic to peanuts. Below was a transcript of the conversation that his wife and I were having, prepared by my secretary, which proved that she was trying to kill him. She put her hands up to her throat, grasping it tightly. She was choking. It was just a peanut in a dissolvable capsule. EpiPen. In. Purse. 1, 2. 10. 100,000 plus. This bracelet. It looks nice on me. And number X200B. 9.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
It starts with people needing some help. It might be a girl you like, or some guys you're trying to impress, or even just an old buddy you bump into on the street. The important thing is that you've got a reputation for smoking weed and they'd like some. Maybe they're new to town, or they want to throw a party and want to impress someone as a one-off, but they need you. They need your help. So that's what you do. You start to help them out by buying weed on their behalf, and then you start charging extra because it soon becomes regular and it's more than just a favor, and then you realize you're putting so much time into it you need to find someone who sells large amounts at a discount. See, what I did was I went after a certain kind of client, someone who through luck and opportunity is rich enough to hide their addiction. Someone who doesn't look like an addict, if you get what I mean. They're hardly immune to the effects of addiction, but consequences are a lot less severe for the upper classes. Good thing that applies to their dealers too. It's nice to have clients who don't die every few years. That's not to say their health is my #1 priority, but I've known most of them for going on 8 years. I've helped them move, fix broken down cars, find dates, rehearse presentations, pick up deliveries, and on one occasion I even babysat one of their nieces while they got high in the garden shed. Sadly, I would have to admit that they're my closest friends. And about a fortnight ago something bad happened to each and every one of them. Normally I like to sell all my goods on a Sunday, no open door policy and no phone calls. I keep a consistent routine and it avoids trouble, but last Tuesday I had one of them knocking at my door. I was pretty pissed to have this guy, Rolo, don't ask, not his real name, turn up out of the blue. That's not how I like to do things, and I was pretty damn close to not opening the door. But, as you might guess, junkies are resistant to denial and he wasn't going to go away out of politeness. So, in the end, I let him in. I found it, Rolo told me. I found it in a gutter on the side of the road, way out in the middle of nowhere. I was driving home and my wife Sheil, oh man I just spotted it. What a weird thing, right? My headlight caught it and I was like, wait, was that? No fucking way. But it was. Just a brick of the stuff waiting for me in a ditch in the middle of nowhere, and he paused and bit down on his thumb so hard I thought he was going to snap it off like a baby carrot. You don't owe me anything, I said. You've been paid up for years. It's not about that though, he replied. It's about the gesture. You helped me. So, here's what I'm thinking. You take this and you sell it. And any money you split with me, and then I use that money to buy more stuff off you when I need it. That way I never have enough on me to just go crazy. You know. I can't even tell you how much strength this took, by the way. I've been driving the streets for like 5 hours just thinking this through carefully. I took the elevator up here 3 times. But I know it's what I need. I can't leave this place with that brick. I weighed it up in my hands. It was easily worth $1,000, and I had to admit, what he said made sense. There was no way any addict could be trusted with that much, least of all him. And, just to reiterate, it was worth a shitload of money. "You found this?" I asked, clearly incredulous. I glanced at the gold leaf symbol stamped onto one side, failing to recognize it but feeling an intense anxiety in its presence. "In a fucking ditch," he said, his face elated. "Someone must have just chucked it. Whoosh, straight out the window." "It's your stuff," I snapped, and he laughed at himself. But I just shook my head and took it to my scales, where I began taking off just a little to give to Rollo. Pretty soon I was left sitting in my flat on my own, staring at the brick with a sense of confusion, partly at the preceding events, partly at the strange pit in my stomach, and partly because that symbol made my eyes hurt. "Do you have any idea how bad that would be for me? That blonde I just mentioned. I'm gonna call her Milky Bar. Anyway, she turned up in one paper having gone missing, last seen a few days before. It was a plea from her husband and parents, asking for her to come home. The paper mentioned her addiction and there were worries she'd relapsed or worse, died. Well, I was worried too, but what I knew that they didn't was that Milky Bar had a small flat she rented in a friend's name where she smoked before going to work. I also happened to have a key from a misguided attempt at seduction, long story. I had an address and access. And I rushed there hoping to God I'd find her partying her tits off or handcuffed to a bed deep in withdrawal. So I kept looking and eventually I found Milky Bar. At least, I figure it was her because of the clothes. Really, I guess all I found was a pile of bones in a sundress with some faint straw-colored hair. Her skull, her mouth, was wide open and the sockets empty, and it just looked like she was in pain. And the porcelain tub was all stained a dark red, looking an awful lot like a puddle of blood. I felt like I'd stumbled into a crypt, the way her bones looked brittle with age, with little teeth marks from rats. "What the fuck happened, man?" he said, stifling a sob. "What? Where's Snickers?" I asked. The kid stopped and stared at me for a long minute before sniffling and pulling his knees up to his chest, holding them close while he rocked back and forth. His eyes were distant, and when he spoke next he didn't talk to me. "I'm a friend of Snickers," I answered. "I was worried something had happened." The kid laughed, and for a brief moment I saw a network of cuts leading down his neck onto his chest. "I don't know," he answered, a quiver in his voice. "We were here, we got high, and then... Jesus Christ," he broke down, holding his face in his hands and crying. I waited patiently until he could resume. "Oh, it was fucking awful, man. You don't even know. They didn't even come, we went to them, man, floating through. I don't even fucking know, the sky. We just all wound up there, washed up on the shore, and then they came and they took us, and I thought it was just a trip, you know. Just a bad trip, but it weren't like that at all. Oh fuck, man, my mom, oh my God, how am I even going to explain this to her? We've been gone so long. You should know, man, you think they let us keep fucking clocks? Where are the police? Where are the ambulances? It's been a year at least." "No," I said. "I saw Snickers just a few days ago." "No." "Yes," I answered. I stood up and the boy flinched. But I happily showed him my phone and the date and even let him scroll through BBC News for a good few minutes. "Look what they did to us, man," the boy screamed as I stumbled past him, tearing open his shirt to reveal a single large black equine eye embedded in his chest. "It took years to grow us into this. Fucking years," he screamed, his shrill voice following me all the way down the hall. And with that I was back in my car, shaking, barely able to think. At this stage I was doing mental back flips to explain what I'd seen, and somehow I got it in my head that what I needed to do was to check up on the others. It had to be fake, I told myself. The only way I'd prove it was if I followed things up. I had to know, it's the human condition, and I couldn't walk away. I couldn't retreat. I couldn't possibly accept living in a world where anything I'd seen in that flat was real. Earlier that year he'd given me a security card for his building and I luckily fished it out of my dash before going in. He had a floor or two in this massive high-rise and I got the card out ready to explain why I needed to enter the building at 2 a.m. to some bleary-eyed security guard only to find the front desk empty. It was a simple flick of a switch to call the elevator, but I couldn't stop staring at the half-drunk cup of tea waiting for the guard. I used the card to get access to Arrow's floor and walked out into an otherwise dead office space. Even though the sky in London isn't very clear, I could still see a full moon hanging over the skyline, following me like an eye as I walked along the enormous windows. All I could glimpse was a desk chair facing me, and the dark outline of someone sitting in it. Stealing my nerves, I forced myself to open the door and found a desiccated corpse waiting for me. Although the skin was leathery and dry, pocked with peeling blisters and signs of decay, enough of the features remained that I could easily tell it was Arrow. Unlike the others, he looked asleep, peaceful even. For a moment I stared at him, lost in the silence, when something behind me fell over and I whipped around, heart thundering. "What happened?" I asked. "Huh? How long has it been?" he repeated. "I'm amazed any of this is still here. I spent so long wondering if I'd have to come back," he said. "I thought I'd never see this place again." He smiled at me, turning into the moonlight for the very first time, and an inexplicable wave of revulsion washed over me. I had to swallow it, trying hard to ignore the bile rising in my throat. It was hard to see, but something about his pallor unsettled me. "And the women?" I asked. "Let me go get my keys," I said, my voice just starting to break. "I dropped them a while back." I turned and went to leave, stopping for a moment in the doorway to look at the doppelganger. He was staring at me, his eyes overcome with a frightening intensity. At that moment, I dropped the pretense and ran, making for a twisting path through the office and doing my utmost best to ignore the sounds of wet footprints behind me. I don't know if he was breathing or panting, but it sounded like a gale wind passing through a beehive. I was desperate to put something between this thing and myself, and for a moment I almost ran to the elevator, but at the last moment images of me slamming my finger into the call lift button as he shuffled out of the darkness burst into my mind, and I went for the stairs instead. I don't remember much else from that night. I awoke in the driver's seat of my car a few hours later, engine idling at a green light as a van driver went caveman on his horn. I drove home, ready to write the whole mad night off, eager to pretend it hadn't happened. It was something I might have managed were it not for the brick waiting for me in my flat. Now I've finally caught up with my rest and I'm left wondering if it's worth checking out the other 8 people. I have maybe a night or more before the police realize I'm the common denominator for a lot of carnage and misery, and maybe getting ahead of it is the only chance I have of knowing what the hell to do.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
This image is from the Kmart Teen 1996 Fall Catalog, and it actually has quite a peculiar story behind it. Kaylee, 19, was the oldest of 3 sisters. In Shawndale she had always been the focus of much praise for her good looks, with many people encouraging her to pursue a life in front of cameras, as a model, an actress, or a newscaster. But Kaylee, an introverted and nervous girl by nature, had always been camera shy, and up until her senior year of high school, resistant to the attention foisted upon her. Kaylee was homeschooled, and spent the majority of her time alone. This had all changed when Kaylee, encouraged by her sisters and her mother, auditioned for the local high school's winter play. Though she was not technically a student of Fairview Valley High, Kaylee won the role of Hermia in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and was allowed to participate in the play. The experience was transformative for Kaylee, who found that she loved to be on stage. She began to ask her parents every day to move to Los Angeles, so she could pursue a career as an actress. Though it seemed an unlikely dream, Kaylee's change of attitude came at the perfect time for the family. Her father, Jay Houston, was recently retired, and her mother, Diana, was between jobs. Her two young sisters were both in the process of switching schools, and their family dog, Pepper, had recently been put down after she was attacked by a coyote or some other small predator in the woods. The move itself had been frustrating, several boxes had been lost, and Jay Houston had begun his first morning in California in a 2-hour-long phone argument with the moving company, switching lines to yell at men from the insurance company, and then back again to accuse the movers of everything from incompetence to outright criminal theft. The women of the Houston family had brightened their day by unpacking and exploring the new house. It had come unfurnished, other than a single landline telephone in a hallway downstairs between the kitchen and the living room. Kaylee said that the connection had been bad and choppy, and that she had only understood part of what the caller was saying. Though Kaylee attempted to move on from the conversation, the call had clearly upset her, and her mother pressed for more information. Kaylee said that the only thing she'd heard was a very soft, very quiet voice, possibly a man but gentle and near a whisper, repeating a phrase again and again. When Kaylee's mother later spoke to the police, she couldn't remember the phrase word for word, but said it had been something like, I'm reaching for you with my little fingers. Kaylee was thrilled by the shoot and felt emboldened, making fast friends with several other young models in the waiting room, making plans to visit a local mall, the Glendale Galleria, that evening. Diana Houston, excited to see her daughter's newfound outgoing attitude in action, allowed her daughter to go out unchaperoned, but ultimately, Kaylee's anxiety got the better of her, and she stayed in, playing board games with her family. It was at 3 a.m. that evening that the family was awoken by the sound of a dog barking from outside. When Jay Houston went outside to check, he found a small red collar, torn apart and stained with blood, left on the front porch under one of the lawn chairs. This sparked a debate within the family. The parents believed that the collar must have been dropped and discarded during the move, and its discovery now was a coincidence. Kaylee's two sisters, both young, speculated that it could have been a coincidence, but Kaylee herself was certain that this was Pepper's collar, the same collar that had been missing when she'd found Pepper, staggering torn apart onto the front lawn several months ago. Things became more complicated when Kaylee, in an effort to prove her point, attempted to locate a picture of Pepper. On the morning of June 25, Jay Houston contacted the Glendale Police Department to report that his wallet had been stolen. That evening, while walking home a long-awaited hangout with her new, Los Angeles friends, Kaylee Houston disappeared and was never seen again. She was last seen leaving a Burger King on Brand Avenue at 6:35 p.m., headed back home to meet up with her younger sisters to see a movie. There are reports of a girl matching Kaylee's description walking quickly, looking upset and anxious, from several eyewitnesses, but none of them could confirm that it was her. In fact, efforts to confirm these sightings were when, in the wake of Kaylee's disappearance, things became truly confounding. Glendale Police and the LAPD, as was common practice, asked for a photograph with which to identify Kaylee, only for the Houstons to, with some degree of consternation, realize that they could not supply even a single photograph of their daughter. The Houstons, confused and upset, contacted Tori Michelle Model Factory, asking after the photographs from Kaylee's Kmart shoot. They were informed, to their great distress, that the negatives and only existing copies of the photographs had been mailed to the Kmart headquarters in Illinois 2 weeks prior, and since Kaylee had not taken a headshot, there were no photos on file. The Houston family copied the single image of their missing daughter from the catalog, and, months after her disappearance, were finally able to put up missing photos, the single glossy catalog image plastered all over telephone poles and bulletin boards in Los Angeles County. After 4 years, the Houston family separated. Jay had become too angry, flying into rages, and had been involved in an obsessive litigation with the moving company, who he blamed for the disappearance of their daughter. Diana moved with the girls back to Shawndale, and then in with her ailing mother in Florida. Gina Houston, Kaylee's youngest sister, died of an overdose in 2007. Paula, the middle child, now takes care of Diana, who fell ill with Alzheimer's in 2010. Sometimes, late at night, Diana will mistake Paula for Kaylee, and can often be found in the front yard of their Tampa, Florida home, calling out for their dog, Pepper. The 40 original photographs of Kaylee have never been found. In November of 2013, a break-in was reported at the home of Andrew Michel, son of Tori Michel, and now the owner of the still operational Tori Michel Model Factory. At first it appeared to be an intentional robbery, but the type of damage reported was more in line with a small animal, with something having torn apart dozens of old files in his storage unit. Nothing was reported stolen. To this day Andrew Michel and the LAPD assume it was a raccoon. If you or anyone you know has information on how to locate the originals, or the rest of the Kmart shoot, please contact me as soon as possible, as I am eager to find them. Stop keeping it from me, I need it. The photograph. There are of course digital copies, but those don't matter as much, they aren't real, you see. And when I get my little fingers on it, she'll have vanished. With how to track E.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
My grandmother forces all her house guests to follow a strange set of rules, by Blair Daniels. It made me really sad. Once Grandma Jan was sharp as a needle, a grounded, logical person who occasionally bought into superstitions and the paranormal. A rabbit's foot here, a penny there. Now it seemed, in her late 80s, that part of her had grown and grown until it subsumed everything else. With a heavy heart, I walked over to the fridge and read the rules. 1. Do not spill salt. 2. Do not open umbrellas inside. 3. Do not put on clothes inside out. 4. Do not clip fingernails after dark. 5. Do not break any mirrors. 6. Do not look in the mirror while wearing black. 7. Do not whistle inside the house. 8. If you wake up to see your bedroom door open, do not close it. Likewise, if you see the attic stairs pulled down, do not push them back up. 9. Never let the refrigerator go empty. Always have enough to make an offering. 10. Keep the curtains closed after 10 p.m. Do not open them again until 6 a.m. I wanted to tell her it was a whole lot of hogwash. But then I realized it was probably a bad idea to upset her at such an old age. No problem, Grandma. I'll follow the rules. But of course, the money wasn't the main reason I was here. My grandma probably wouldn't be around much longer. According to my mom, she kept getting these random bruises, and doctors were worried she had a blood disorder. And some other stuff I couldn't pronounce. I wanted to spend all the time I could with her. She was still my grandma. Still the one that comforted me when my first cat died, still the one who taught me how to bake the most amazing snickerdoodles. I loved her even if I had to put up with some weird-ass rules. I spent an hour on the internet, then put away my computer and fell asleep. ////. I snuggled up to my pillow and closed my eyes. A soft, melancholy tune, coming from downstairs. When I entered the kitchen, it was empty. Grandma? Where are you? I looked up to see Grandma appear from the dark family room, wearing her floral nightdress. Did I wake you, honey? I'm so sorry. I wanted to get some milk for my heartburn. No, it's fine. I just thought you weren't supposed to whistle, I said, with a chuckle. According to the rules. You heard the whistling? She asked, her eyes wide. I nodded. She grabbed my arm in a vice grip and led me back up the stairs. Go back to sleep, she commanded. Before I could reply, she disappeared back down the hallway, leaving my door open. I think Grandma's going crazy. I sighed. Isn't it bad for her mental health? We all go a little crazy near the end. Uncle Finley, though the government was tapping all his phones in his 90s. Great-Grandma Beasley always talked about some bat following her around. Just best to let sleeping dogs lie, at this point. So I followed the rules. I was a good girl and didn't open any umbrellas indoors, do any whistling, or break any mirrors. Sometimes I'd wake up to see my door open in the middle of the night, but I just ignored it and left it open. A few times, when I made my way to the bathroom, I whacked my head on the attic stairs that were pulled down. Once or twice I heard the whistling again, but I ignored that, too. Things were good as I accepted that reality. Then Sunday happened. I didn't mean, I just was cleaning up the plates and she could barely make cohesive sentences through the sobs. I felt awful seeing Grandma like that. She was outright sobbing, her entire body shaking, as if she feared for her life. Over spilled salt. It's all clean. See? I said, brushing off my hands. The salt rained down into the trash. Nothing to worry about, Grandma. What? Who? She looked at me. The spirit of the house. The spirit of the house. Despite how skeptical I was of ghosts, spirits, and everything paranormal, I felt a shiver go down my spine. Wasn't it legend that ghosts and spirits didn't like salt? That if you surrounded yourself with salt, you'd be protected from them? Propagating a superstition about spilling salt could be a ghost's defense mechanism. It was around 4:15 that I heard something stir. Thump, thump, thump. Soft footsteps from overhead. From the attic. Every muscle in my body froze as I listened to the steps migrate towards Grandma's end of the house. Followed by footsteps. Maybe the ghost is here, right now, staring at me. And I just don't know it. No, shut up. Ghosts don't exist, you idiot. The back of my neck prickled with the distinct, awful feeling of being watched. But rather than run back into my own room, believe me, I really wanted to, I ran over to check on Grandma. Her door hung open, as usual. Grandma, are you okay? Her bed was empty. Grandma? Where are you? Grandma stood in the kitchen. Not some dark, ethereal specter. Not some white, translucent ghost. A man, of flesh and blood. His brown beard was unkempt and messy, his blue eyes wild. He wore tattered clothes, black boots, and a yellow-toothed grin. Call the police. I shouted. Now. ///. According to the police, he'd snuck into my poor grandma's house over a year ago. They found his living space in the attic, complete with a makeshift bed over the rafters, books, and dishes that held my grandma's leftover food. The offerings. For the time being, she's moved in with me. We have a tiny little apartment near my college, and I've been helping her recover. She's doing well. She freaked out a little when I dropped a cosmetic mirror the other day, but overall, she's getting much better.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse. In the best way.
I'm in the middle of watching some luxury cruise tour, close passing out when I hear the front door open. I sit up and turn my head slightly, just enough to see my roommate coming in. He hangs his jacket in the closet and doesn't say anything and walks slowly to his room. Which is normal enough. I'd been living with him for about 3 months, long enough for me to pick up on most of his tendencies. So I go back to watching YouTube, and about 5 minutes later I hear the shower in his room turning on. Once again, nothing strange. At this point, I'm watching bare-knuckle boxing highlights with my eyes half open, maybe 1 or 2 minutes away from passing out. I remembering waking up in darkness, my head hurting, my throat dry as hell. I sat up slowly, waiting for the grogginess to settle into something manageable. Once it did, I grabbed my phone, checked the time. Around 3:30 a.m. from what I remember. "Hey man, you alright?" No response. I considered kicking the door down but decided to call 911 before I did that. I took my phone out, preparing to dial when I noticed that I had an unread text. One from my roommate. "Hey man, I couldn't sleep so I went over to my girlfriend's place. Not sure when I'll be back. Sent 2 hours ago." I look at the bathroom door, then back down at my phone. Everything about this was wrong. I tried calling him. No answer. Sent him some texts but no response. I walked over to his desk and saw that his keys and wallet were still beside his laptop. My head's starting to spin at this point, and I get out of there, go back into the living room and turn on the lights. I'm pacing around in a circle, trying to follow the plot while also trying to ignore the shower, a noise that I never could have imagined being so dreadful in any context. Sometime later, I hear something vibrating on the kitchen counter. I move towards it and see that it's a phone. My roommate's phone. The panic begins setting in, and immediately I grab my keys and run out of the apartment. I make my way down the hall and take the stairs down to the lobby, but even that doesn't seem far enough away, and so I make my way over to the McDonald's across the street. I sit there for a while, considering calling the cops but for some reason feeling too nervous to do so. I froze in place, my mind hardly able to understand or accept what it was seeing. It's not my roommate. It's too tall. In fact, it's too tall to be anybody I know, its head nearly scraping the bottom of the balcony above. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make out any of its details. The darkness and distance may have been enough to explain that away. But there was something about it that drove me towards a different conclusion, that this thing simply possessed no details that could have been observed, that the only element of its composition was that of unadulterated darkness. Of course, my gut instinct was to get the hell away from it. But the voice in my head was telling me that if I were to try and run, this thing would end up following me. I remembered hearing more scattered gunshots, some screaming, other noises that were difficult to make sense of. There were a few lapses in my memory after that, but I recall being pushed into the back of a police car. After being driven to the station, I was led into one of the interrogation rooms where I found 2 nondescript men in suits waiting for me. They didn't introduce themselves and immediately went into a series of questions, each one more bizarre than the last. What company was your roommate employed by? What was the nature of his job? Have you ever heard voices inside the apartment from the hours of midnight to 3 a.m.? Voices that did not belong to your roommate? Have you ever seen a circle of people standing outside of the apartment from the hours of midnight to 3 a.m.? People that were exceptionally tall. Have you ever seen somebody standing at the foot of your bed upon waking up between the hours of midnight to 3 a.m., only for them to disappear moments later? If so, do you remember what they looked like? Any distinct features? After doing my best to give them useful information, the suits spent a good few minutes taking notes on their phones. Once they were done, they sat up quickly, told me that they'd be in touch before leaving the room. What happened? I asked him. What did you guys find up there? He stared at me for a long time, not as if he were deep in thought but as if he held deep aversion for what he was considering telling me. It's the next day now and I'm in the hotel. Of course I couldn't sleep. Couldn't really eat. The officer hasn't called me yet. When I try searching up information about the evacuation on the internet, all I can find are articles claiming that it was due to a fire. I fell asleep and I just woke up. It's 1 a.m. now.
And now, as the hour gets cold, and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously, this next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is HorrorSlop.
Mimicry, by Pippinacious. If I had been worried about her getting lonely while I was away, those concerns were quickly banished when I realized she was making fast friends with the mockingbirds who nested in a tree behind my apartment. They'd trade calls and squawk at each other throughout the day, which sometimes got me in a little trouble with my more noise-sensitive neighbors, but that wasn't anything a few homemade cookies and apology cards couldn't smooth over. Shit. It said. It was going to take a lot more cookies to get back on my neighbors' good sides when they figured that one out. Hello. Claudette said. In the meantime, I kept working with Claudette to clean up her own language and spent a bit of time every night repeating words to her and rewarding her when she got them right. It took a few more weeks and months, but the swearing was definitely on a decline and I hadn't heard the mockingbirds repeating her anymore, so I was counting it a victory. Hello. She said, and the odd breathing stopped. I waited for a little while, almost enough time to make me late, but she seemed fine and I rushed out to get to work. The next morning, however, the low, rasping noises were back. She again came over to me and fluffed and bobbed, all the while making the ragged breathing sounds. Outside, the mockingbirds were responding with unusual clicking noises. I didn't pay much attention to them, too concerned for my poor parrot. Sometimes these things come and go. Dr. Graham said gently. Can you do me a favor? Imitate the sound she was making. I quickly did as he asked, hoping I'd be accurate enough for him to understand the severity of the situation, and immediately, Claudette started to mimic me. She's fine, Stacy. It seems she may have, overheard you during some nighttime activities and is just repeating those sounds. Claudette emphasized his statement with an unmistakable little moan. Claudette's heavy breathing sound started to become a more frequent part of our morning, along with the occasional moan, and every so often, she'd mumble to herself. Pretty, pretty, pretty. At least that was an improvement on shit. She and the mockingbirds continued their back and forth and I got used to their clicking noises the same way I had their swearing. It was especially bad in the morning when Claudette was doing what I came to call her breathing exercises. Rinse and repeat until midday. How's Claudette doing? My sister asked while we drank wine and had our weekly Thursday night phone call. She's fine, still doing that nasty breathing thing. Oh, I said. The mockingbirds are doing the thing I told you about. Maybe you can hear them and tell me what this damn noise is. Beside me, Claudette paced back and forth across her cage top, mumbling all the while. A bush on the other side of the screen shook just slightly. The light from inside my apartment reflected off the porch screen, making it difficult to see outside, and I froze. From the trees overhead, the mockingbirds responded with their clicks. Raina, I said as calmly as I could, I think someone's in my bushes. As soon as the words left my mouth, a dark figure sprang upright and was making a mad dash around the side of the apartment building. It happened so quickly that I couldn't make out much, no features, nothing significant, just dark clothes and maybe a hat, and then he was gone. It had taken months for me to teach Claudette words, months for her to pick up new sounds, months for her to learn to mimic accurately. No doubt it would have taken the same amount of time listening to someone breathing heavily and moaning to repeat the sounds accurately. My stomach dropped, fast and far, and I thought I might vomit. She hadn't learned those sounds from noisy neighbors or a television show. She'd learned it from the man who'd been hiding outside my apartment, panting like a dog while he watched me. I stumbled back against the slider and scrambled to get inside again. Click click.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness, I did it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon, and leave a comment telling us what Stern made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same dat time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.